Yo legends, welcome back to the channel. Grab your headphones and lock in because today's story is on another level. Want the next chapter? Drop a comment below, and if the legend continues, I'm bringing it straight to you. Disclaimer, I do not claim ownership of this story. All rights belong to the original creators. Note, I'm constantly tweaking the settings to make it as immersive as possible. Marvel, Awakening the Universe. Chapter 1, Cultivating Mystic Universe in the Marvel Universe. Chapter 1, Cultivating Mystic Universe in the Marvel Universe. Please add to your favorites. Marvel Universe. 2012, 6-month 15-day. Friday. New York City, Midtown High School. 17-year-old Hawk is sweating profusely in the old gymnasium. Oh. Booms bang bang. One after another, strong impact sounds continued to ring out. As Hawk kept hitting the black sandbag hanging in the air, the iron chain hanging the sandbag also made a harsh sound the moment the black sandbag was raised. Hawk's hair was already soaked with sweat. Sweat slid down his high cheekbones, flowed over his taut jawline, and finally dripped onto the collar of his old t-shirt, which had also been soaked with sweat. But Hawk's eyes never left the sandbag. No distractions. At this moment, the sandbag in front of him is his entire world. 9,951. 9,952. Hawk adjusted his pace, muttering to himself as he dodged the impact of the sandbag swinging back. Without any pause, he unleashed left hooks, right hooks. Each punch hit the sandbag hard. The sandbag shook violently under his stormy attack, and the leather on the surface of the sandbag looked even more worn and torn from the repeated impacts. Punch. Hold your fist. Punch again. As Hawk threw punch after punch, his movements seemed to be getting faster and faster. Faster and faster. Until 10,000. Oh. The fire in the depths of Hawk's eyes suddenly swelled up at this moment. The fist that had just been retracted shot out like lightning, and like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue, it accurately hit the sandbag that had just fallen. The sandbag suddenly caved in backwards, making a painful muffled sound. The chain connecting the sandbag finally couldn't hold on and broke directly. The sandbag, freed from the chains, flew backwards, wailing in the air before hitting the ground heavily with a loud bang. Boom. Cull. With the completion of today's 10,000 punches, Hawk looked at the sandbag that had fallen to the ground and torn into pieces, and then he exhaled the breath that he had been holding in until now. His chest rose and fell slightly as he steadied his breathing. Sweat streamed down his face, pooling at the tip of his chin before dripping down the legs of his cheap sweatpants. Of course, cheap is relative. To others, these $12 pants might seem cheap, or even very cheap. But that's not the case for Hawk. After all, he is an orphan in this life, and an orphan who traveled through time and space and was reborn into the Marvel Universe. If he had not achieved excellent academic performance in this life and received a scholarship to Central City University, let's put it this way, the tuition fees of tens of thousands of dollars per semester alone would have been something he could never afford. But even though Hawk received the scholarship, he still lived frugally. This is not because he has a good habit of saving money, but because although he received a scholarship from the school, it was not the highest level. At least not like Gwen Stacy, the student assistant in the same grade. Gwen Stacy received the highest scholarship. Not only is studying free, the school even provides a sum of money every semester, not to mention the various knowledge competitions with extremely generous prizes. Hawk's scholarship is the most common kind, which is a scholarship that waives tuition fees. After all, his grades can only be considered excellent, not very excellent. But Hawk was also satisfied with this. Midtown High School waived his tuition and provided a monthly subsidy of $800 to federal orphans like him who had no foster family and were between the ages of 16 and 18, a period known as the Transition to Independence period. And because he was admitted to Midtown High School, an elite school in New York State, the state of New York also provides him with a subsidy of $500 per month. By this calculation, he can earn $1,300 a month. That might not be enough for an adult living in New York City, but it's enough for Hawk, who still receives federal orphan aid and attends school tuition free. Even more than enough. After all, he ate at school and slept in a federal welfare cheap apartment. With a monthly subsidy of $1,300 minus the $500 required to maintain basic living expenses, he can still save $800 every month. What 500 isn't enough, I'll say it again. Maybe not enough for an adult, but enough for Hawk. He would complete his daily 10,000 punches a day routine at the gym every afternoon, then wash his clothes after taking a shower there, and then take the last free school bus home, sleep there, and then take the earliest school bus to school the next day. He doesn't even have money to pay for water and electricity, let alone phone or internet bills. He is an orphan. If one person is full, the whole family will not be hungry. Who could he call, and who would call him? As for the internet fee, he doesn't even have a computer. Anyway, when he needs to use the internet, there are public computers in the school library, and even printing is free. And so, although he was reborn as an orphan in this life, Hawk felt that he was doing well. He can save $800 every month, and can even go to an equally cheap fried chicken restaurant every now and then and order a big bowl of fried chicken to replenish his energy. So far, he has saved more than $30,000. Delicious. Of course. It would be better if there were fewer black people in fried chicken restaurants. After a while, Hawk stood there with his eyes slightly closed. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at the sandbag that fell to the ground in front of him, seeming to be in a trance. Because he was not looking at the sandbag, but at a prompt box that appeared in front of him. To be precise, he was the one who died. Small universe practice. Current status, inactive. Activation condition. Throw your fist 10,000 times for 1,000 consecutive days. Activation progress, 999/1000. Almost. Almost. It can be activated tomorrow. Hawk looked at the activation progress displayed in the prompt box in front of him that only he could see, and his heart warmed. He wished that time could teleport directly to tomorrow. This cheat was launched when he was 15 years old in this life. To be precise, it was launched on September 10, 2009. He remembered it very clearly, because that day happened to be the day when Hulk and Abomination fought in New York City. So he did not slack off at all. Come and practice now. No way. Who made him travel to the Marvel universe where superheroes are everywhere, extraordinary beings are worse than dogs, and cosmic gods are everywhere. I didn't hang up before, I just lay down. But now that you are dead, why are you still lying down? Then it would be a waste of time. And so, since the day the plugin was launched, Hawk has maintained the habit of punching 10,000 times every day. A day at least. Rain or shine. Untouchable. In short, just one sentence. You don't have to eat. Boxing must be practiced. Today it is today. He has maintained the habit of punching 10,000 times a day for 999 consecutive days. At the moment, the dawn of victory is finally coming. A new book for newbies, begging for collection, 200,000 manuscripts in reserve, a Jedi fight. End of this chapter, Chapter 2, Lightning Thomson and Nerd Parker. Chapter 2, Lightning Thomson and Nerd Parker, signed, please add to your favorites. 1,000 days. 2 years, 9 months, and 5 days. After completing today's task, Hawk, who was taking a shower in the gymnasium shower room, once again called out the plugin interface that was visible only to himself. Looking at the progress bar that showed that he was only 1 day away from completing the merit and activating the microcosm cultivation, he still felt like he was dreaming. After all, punching 10,000 times a day, continuously for 1,000 days, is easy to say but difficult to do. Sometimes Hawk didn't know how he managed to hold on. Maybe it's because he is a person who never gives up. Or maybe it has something to do with the fact that this is the Marvel Universe. Hawk didn't know either. But one thing is for sure. One day. Just one day. Once today is over, he can activate the plugin tomorrow. Small universe practice. I don't know if it's what I have in mind. Hawke thought to himself. In his memory, there was only one thing that could be connected with microcosmic cultivation. If that's what he really thought. That, the future is expected. According to the ancient Greek philosopher Democritus, everything is made up of atoms, and there is also a miniature universe inside the human body. That is the microcosm. To cultivate the microcosm is to successfully activate the microcosm hidden in one's body by constantly stimulating the energy of one's own life, to improve one's microcosm through continuous practice, and then to gain combat power that transcends the laws of physics by burning one's microcosm. Hawke remembered that there was an anime in his previous life that described the universe. The name of that anime is Saint Seiya, a bronze saint who controls the first 5 senses and touches the 6th sense. A silver saint who has mastered the 6th sense and touched the 7th sense. There are also gold saints who have comprehended and thoroughly mastered the 7th sense. But above the 7th sense, there is the 8th sense and even the 9th sense. Hawke recalled the fragmentary images of the Saint Seiya movie from his previous life. Next second, Hawke came back to his senses, seemed to have thought of something, and couldn't help but shook his head and smiled. He is not even sure whether the small universe he is plugging in is the one in his memory, so why think so much? And he had no intention of punching Odin or kicking Zeus. The most important thing, it has been 17 years since he traveled to this world. Even before he was 15, before the plugins were online, he had already prepared himself mentally to face this bloody world without plugins. And so, attitude is very important. The greater the expectations now, the greater the disappointment will be if they are not met at the time. Hawke thought so, brushed away the distracting thoughts in his mind, wrung out the washed t-shirt in his hands, and placed it in a plastic bag beside him together with the freshly washed pants. Then he wrapped himself in a bath towel, wiped his hair with the towel, and pushed open the door of the compartment. Boom, the door of the shower room was pushed open, and then a thin-looking figure seemed to be pushed in from outside. The thin figure stumbled a few steps, then fell to his butt and sat on the tile floor of the shower room. This is Peter. Hawke raised his eyebrows as he watched the first-generation spider spirit being pushed in from outside and falling to the ground. Peter also saw Hawke coming out of the shower room at this moment. He looked a little embarrassed. Just as he was about to greet Hawke, who was in the same grade but whom he hadn't really interacted with, a burst of laughter came from outside the door. Then, Flesh Thomson, nicknamed Lightning and also known as Midtown Bully, a tall, burly man and captain of the school's football team, carrying a football and accompanied by his 3 henchmen, walked in laughing. Next second, the laughter stopped abruptly. Hawke, who had just come out of the cubicle, was wiping his wet hair with one hand, wringing a plastic bag of washed clothes with the other, and had his lower body wrapped in a bath towel. After Flash Thompson came in, he set his eyes on Flash Thompson. Flash Thompson was a tall and strong man. Hawke is not bad either. Hawke has been exercising continuously for 999 days, throwing 10,000 punches every day, and he has a body of strong muscles. And this is different from the muscles that are built in gyms outside, through technology and tough talk. The lines of his arms are full of strength, not exaggerated, but refined with explosive power. The towel was tied around her waist, creating a shallow indentation above her hip bones, which only served to emphasize her narrowness. Her abdominal muscles were clearly visible, their 8 muscles neatly arranged like a carefully crafted suit of armor. A few glances at each other. The air seemed to freeze at this moment. Well known. In American schools, there is a very clear chain of contempt, or bullying. Logically speaking, Hawke, who started out as an orphan without a father or a mother, would have been bullied simply because of his family background. Unfortunately not. It wasn't that he had dealt with the school bullies before, so the school bullies knew that he was not to be messed with. The reason why the school bullies didn't bother him was simple. After all, whether it was his appearance or his figure, Hawke would never be associated with the word easy to bully. Of course, in the past 3 years, the school bullies have never bothered him, so he naturally has no intention of standing up for others. No one is anyone's savior. This time, too, Hawke withdrew his gaze, took out a clean t-shirt and pants from the backpack on the lounge chair, and put them on again. Then he put the plastic bag into the backpack, slung it over his shoulder, and walked towards Fresh Thomson, who was standing at the door of the shower room. Fresh Thomson frowned and looked at Hawke, who walked up to him. He knew Hawke. After all, it would be difficult for him not to recognize someone who has been doing 10,000 punches in the corner of the gym every day for more than 2 years. But if you say it's familiar, then it's not at all. Because Hawke never participates in various gatherings or even parties. Although he can be seen at school every day, Hawke seems to be living alone in a parallel world. Flash Thomson looked at Hawke, who had stopped in front of him. Huo, please give way. Flash Thomson subconsciously moved aside. The 3 followers behind him wanted to say something, but the moment they met Hawke's blue eyes that seemed to care nothing about anything, they obeyed the call of their hearts and moved aside. Thank you. Hawke looked at Flash Thomson, who had made way, said thank you calmly, and then left the shower room on his own. Flash Thomson looked at Hawke's disappearing back, frowning, not knowing what he was thinking. At this time, the 3 followers exclaimed in surprise. Thick and greasy's IT. Boss Peter ran away. What? Flash Thomson came back to his senses and looked at Peter Parker, who ran out after Hawke while he was not paying attention. He immediately reacted and roared. Follow. Nerdy Parker, stop right there. My first book is a newbie. Please add it to your favorites. End of this chapter. Chapter 3 tonight, the universe will shine for him. Chapter 3 tonight, the universe will shine for him. Please add to your favorites. After Hawke left the old gymnasium, he headed towards the parking lot. He had no idea what was happening behind him. However, even if he knew, he would not care. Although Spider-Man is known as the #1 IP character in American comics, to be honest, Hawke and Peter are not familiar with each other, even though he is in the same grade as Peter. By the time Hawke arrived at the parking lot with his shoulder bag, the door of the last orange school bus had already opened. A bearded driver in school uniform was hunched over the steering wheel, fiddling with a portable radio, looking bored. Good afternoon, Mr. Hall. Hawke got in the car and greeted politely. Any special news today? Mr. Hall, with his big beard, looked extremely fierce. But Mr. Hall is not actually vicious. Quite the opposite. He is a good man. It's still the news about the Quantico building collapse. It's said to be a terrorist attack. Mr. Hall, who was fiddling with his radio, looked at Hawke as he got into the car, checked the time on his watch, and said, Hawke, you're 2 minutes later today than yesterday. Hawke shrugged. Sorry, I was delayed in taking a shower today. Luckily, I know you take my car home every day, otherwise I would have driven to the school gate. Sit tight, let's go. Okay. Hawke remained polite, carrying his backpack and walking towards the back. Mr. Hall had already started the car and was about to close the door and go to the school gate to pick someone up. At this time, Peter rushed out from a distance and squeezed in from outside almost as the school bus door was about to close. Mr. Hall was startled. Thick and greasy. Perhaps realizing that swearing was impolite, Mr. Hall swallowed the words back as they were about to come out of his mouth. He then looked at Peter, who was squeezing in and panting, and then at Fresh Thomson and the other 4 who were running over from outside. Flash Thomson and his followers did not get on the school bus, but stood outside and watched Peter get on the bus. Mr. Hall glanced at Peter getting in the car and Fresh Thomson outside the car, then frowned at Fresh Thomson and said, Hey, do you want to get in the car? Fresh Thomson glanced at Mr. Hall, said nothing, turned around, and left angrily with his 3 followers. Bullying classmates is one thing, but bullying in front of school staff is another. He is a bully, not a stupid bully. Peter was no fool either, so after waiting for Mr. Hall to close the car door, he thanked Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall glanced at Peter and said nothing. He knew what was going on, but as long as the bullying didn't happen in his car, it was fine. As for other places, he is just a school bus driver. He has no control over it, and it is not his responsibility. Peter didn't say anything else, but turned around and prepared to find a place to sit down. Then he saw Hawk sitting at the back by the window. After thinking for a moment, he walked over. "Thank you." Hawk, who was staring out the window absent-mindedly and thinking that the early morning was the next day, came back to his senses and looked at Peter standing in front of him with a blank expression. "I didn't help you with anything. You don't have to thank me." After saying this, he turned his gaze back to the window and ignored Peter. He didn't know if Peter had mutated now. It is highly likely that she has not yet turned into the spider spirit in our memory. But even if Peter had mutated, he didn't want to deal with Peter. To be exact, he didn't want to deal with any superheroes. Superheroes sound nice, but in fact they are closely linked to all kinds of disasters. Before he had the cheat, he had never thought about rushing to deal with these superheroes. He just wanted to live longer, be reborn, and at least live a natural life to the end of his life. If possible, study hard, strive for excellence every day, and try to live a more carefree life. Even with the cheat system now available, Hawk's original intention remains unchanged. Only, from living a more carefree life at the beginning, it has become living longer and more carefree if possible. But no matter which one, the prerequisites for achieving this goal are the same. In a word, stay out of superhero. So, even after he enrolled in school and knew about Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy, he had no intention of taking the initiative to get to know them. But Gwen was different. No way. Gwen was their 11th grade student assistant, but she was dating Gwen Stacy, the recognized #1 girlfriend in American comics. Hawk didn't have this idea, at least not now. He is not qualified to talk about love now. Peter looked at Hawk, who turned his head to look at the scenery again after saying this. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something else, but after thinking about it, he chose to shut up and turned around to sit down on the seat on the right. Soon, the school bus arrived at the school gate. After Mr. Hall opened the door, the students who were waiting outside for the last free school bus got on the bus one after another. The originally quiet environment in the car quickly became noisy. After an hour, we've arrived in Jackson Heights. Mr. Hall opened the car door and said goodbye to Hawk, who was already standing at the door with a smile. "See you tomorrow, Hawk." "See you tomorrow, Mr. Hall." Hawk also said goodbye politely, got off the school bus, and then walked towards a 5-story old apartment building with a mottled orange exterior not far away. This old apartment building is owned by the New York City Housing Authority. Hawk's apartment is on the 5th floor. Although it is not large, it has one advantage. He can easily go to the rooftop of the apartment through the escape stairs outside the window. Soon, Hawk returned home, put his backpack on the table, took out the plastic bag of washed clothes from the backpack, found 2 clotheslines, opened the window, and went up to the rooftop of the apartment along the emergency stairs outside. After Hawk hung the clothes on the rooftop, he walked to the edge of the rooftop railing, supported himself on the railing with both hands, and looked up at the planes flying across the sky from time to time, preparing to land at the nearby LaGuardia Airport or taking off from LaGuardia Airport. Counting planes while feeling the wind. It was one of the few hobbies he used to relax. But recently, he has added a new hobby. Look at the stars, night falls. Hawk sat on the floor against the ventilation shaft of the apartment behind him, enjoying the summer evening breeze while looking up at the starry sky that appeared after nightfall. The starry sky is vast. Starry. Maybe it's an illusion. Since half a year ago, Hawk has always felt that as he continues to punch 10,000 times a day, he feels connected to the vast starry sky. This feeling is even stronger today. The constellations that seemed blurry when viewed with the naked eye last night have become exceptionally clear today. Pegasus Draco, Whitebird Andromeda Phoenix, Lycerda. The 48 constellations, symbolizing the 48 bronze saints, are now in Hawk's eyes. Seem. Tonight, the whole universe will sparkle for him. End of this chapter. Chapter 4 Burn, My Inner Universe. Chapter 4 Burn, My Inner Universe. Please add to your favorites. It's past midnight on the rooftop of the apartment. Hawk is boxing. No sandbags. No fighting skills either. Hawk didn't even move, just stood there with his eyes slightly closed, and then as if in a trance, he threw punch after punch at the air in front of him. This time, he no longer pursued speed, but seemed to have fallen into some kind of enlightenment state. Although before this, every time he swung a punch, he would have a strange feeling in his heart. But tonight it felt even more intense. Hawk felt as if he had entered a place that was infinitely dark no matter from which angle he looked at it. But, with every punch he threw, a ray of light would bloom in the infinite darkness. If Hawk looked up carefully at this moment, he would find something even more peculiar. That is, dotted on the night sky, the bronze constellations consisting of 48 constellations, such as Pegasus, Draco, Aves, Phoenix, Lacerta, etc., which he could observe with the naked eye, also flashed in response to his every punch. Yes, it's not just one sign that's responding, it's all of them. All 48 bronze constellations responded to Hawk's punch. One punch, and another punch. Hawk hit slowly this time, but quickly at the same time. Although he always made sure to retract his fists before throwing the second punch, the afterimage of the second punch often appeared before the afterimage of the first punch completely disappeared. Then came the third punch, the fourth punch, the fifth punch, and so on until now. Fist shadows all over the sky. At this moment, suddenly, a roar sounded in Hawk's mind. The sound is too weak to be heard, but it sounds like the sound of a huge bell. Bang, a wisp of flame appeared at the sound, and with the appearance of the flame, the stars that were completely reflected in the infinite space through reality under Hawk's punch after punch spread out like ripples, quietly sweeping away the thick black curtain. At first it was just a slight throbbing. Then this throbbing suddenly expanded, like the first big bang of the universe, and the stars dotted in the infinite black sky suddenly exploded. Inside Hawk's body, an invisible and intangible wall collapsed under the energy released by the first big bang of the universe, and a power that had been dormant for billions of years suddenly awakened. Swish, Hawk opened his eyes, which were slightly closed. The moment he opened his eyes, the flame deep in his eyes was no longer the same as before. It just bloomed and then quietly went out. This time, the flames burst into full bloom. Boom! Hawk only felt that the blood around him was rushing and roaring, and every tiny cell in his body was trembling wildly, as if 10,000 stars were expanding at the same time. Under this violent shock and expansion, every inch and every bone was constantly being defeated and broken. But in the blink of an eye, it was reshaped by this terrifying force that seemed to be experiencing the birth of a star. Hawk heard a buzzing sound in his ears, and then he felt his eyes blurred, and then he saw a magical picture. He saw the particles that made up his flesh and blood spinning violently, burning, and collapsing, finally performing a scene like the original Big Bang of the universe. He saw the blood flowing beneath his skin, like a boiling and roaring galaxy. He even saw his own beating heart. Every beat of his heart was like the original and eternal pulsation at the creation of the universe, shaking and creating invisible ripples in the infinite void. Next moment, good fortune comes to your heart. The moment Hawk clenched his right fist, he pressed his heels into the ground, his feet like a plow. At the moment he shattered the rooftop, the center of gravity of his entire body retreated backwards. Retreat. Then, punch. Hawk let out a low groan that didn't come from his throat, but from his exploding soul. Burn, my little universe. Boom, boom, boom. The surrounding air shook like water waves at this moment. The surrounding space shattered like glass at this moment. The flow of time around him seemed to be violently torn apart at this moment. The air, space, and even time seemed to have stopped under Hawk's punch. Next second, hiss. The air screamed as if it was being torn apart. Bang, bang. The space echoed with the mournful sound of being crushed. Boom. Time was completely destroyed by this blow. But then, a brand new timeline instantly replaced the defeated timeline. Bang, 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 the exterior glass of the apartment next to Hawk's apartment, which was across the street from him, exploded and shattered under the wind of the punch, making a deafening sound of breaking. Bang, bang, bang. Wow. Wow. The vehicles parked on the opposite road were suddenly pressed down, as if by an invisible giant hand that fell from the sky. The car's windows shattered, and then the car alarm went off, emitting sharp sirens one after another. At the same time, Kamataj. Okay. Teacher. The temple's wizard looked at the supreme wizard, who suddenly made a sound of confusion. The supreme sorcerer in a yellow robe lowered his eyes and looked at the holy relic of the temple hanging around his neck, the Eye of Agamotto. Ancient One formed a seal with his hands, and the Eye of Agamotto slowly rotated and then opened. A dark green light bloomed from the dark green gem that looked extremely mysterious and profound. This gem has a common name in the Marvel Universe. Time Gem. It allows users to reach any point in time and thus travel through time, no matter how far in the past or how distant in the future. The Time Stone controls the known and all unknown timelines. Controlling the Time Stone is equivalent to controlling time. The future has been changed. Ancient One formed a seal with his hands once again, closed the Eye of Agamotto, stood up, and disappeared on the spot. Ding! Congratulations, you have activated your microcosmic cultivation. Ding! It's my honor to have spent 1,000 days with you. The cheat will be untied soon. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Finally, the microcosmic cultivation method is a method of combat, a method of holy war. Grow in combat and ascend in combat. Goodbye. The mechanical sound of the plugin sounded in Hawk's mind. 1,000 days ago, the plugin was quietly launched. 1,000 days later, the cheat was quietly taken offline again. Come quietly. Walk quietly. It was already bright outside at this moment. Thick and greasy's IT. Here's what happened. My glass. Ah, my car. Who the hell did this? Wait a moment. Look, what is that? Thank you. Jesus Christ. Standing on the rooftop of the apartment, Hawk listened to all kinds of noises that seemed to ring right next to his ears. He slowly opened his eyes and saw the gap in the sky above Manhattan that was torn by a faint blue light. Hawk was stunned for a moment. Hiss. Did I just punch a hole in the sky? New author, new book, 200,000 manuscripts in stock. Feel free to collect it. End of this chapter. Chapter 5, One Punch Shatters the New York Sky. Chapter 5, Shattering the Sky of New York with One Punch. Hawk was stunned as he watched the sky above Manhattan being torn apart, revealing the infinite darkness of the sky. Above Manhattan, a faint blue light shot up into the sky, continuously shooting into the gap in the sky, as if opening up a space. The space opened up in the sky seemed to be roughly torn apart by an invisible hand, and the edges kept flashing with faint blue light and crackling sounds. Hawk subconsciously lowered his gaze to his right hand. But, next second, he reacted. Wrong. The sky was not torn apart by him, but by the space gem. 2012. Chitauri invasion, Hawk's mind moved, and he thought of the current timeline. With a swish, his gaze fell back on the torn sky. Really? As the space gate opened above Manhattan, the Chitauri soldiers, like a swarm of metal locusts, passed through the space gate as if being poured out. Suddenly gushed out. The Chitauri soldiers who came to Earth from the space gate rode in streamlined, individual aircraft that flashed with a cold light. Their engines emitted a sharp, teeth-grinding buzzing sound, and their dark alloy shells tightly wrapped around their inhuman bodies. Boom! As the first Chitauri soldier pulled the trigger on his energy weapon, the glass curtain wall of the Manhattan skyscraper was instantly pierced and exploded. Uproar! Attack! Invasion! Invasion! Kill them! The swarming Chitauri soldiers roared excitedly, and after emerging from the wormhole, they quickly determined their respective tasks. Some of the Zetatian soldiers lowered their aircraft and flew towards the streets of Manhattan. Some Chitauri soldiers raised their flying vehicles, confirmed the direction of attack in the air, and then flew towards Brooklyn. Of course, Queens was also within the range of the Zetas' troops. Thick and greasy IT. What is that? Aliens invade Earth. They're coming our way. Hiss. God. Run. What? Just like Manhattan, which was now in chaos, the residents of Queens screamed shrilly when they saw the Chitauri firing energy weapons towards them, indiscriminately piercing high-rise buildings, setting cars on fire, and even killing civilians. They all ran in the direction they thought was safe. The strange cries of the Zetatian soldiers. The sound of tall buildings breaking down. The burning sound of a car being shot up. The wailing of the killed civilians and the shouting of panic. At this moment, the whole city of New York was plunged into great panic. Hawke, standing on the rooftop, subconsciously turned around and went back into the apartment. But the moment he turned around, he suddenly stopped, as if he thought of something. Then he turned around again and looked up at the sky. At this moment, the Chitauri soldiers were rushing towards Queens like a swarm of locusts. A Chitauri soldier who was flying in the sky and roaring towards this side in a flying vehicle also saw Hawke standing on the rooftop. After all, what invaders like to see most is that under their invasion, the people are powerless to scream and wail in an attempt to escape from their butcher knives. So, when everyone else was fleeing in panic, Hawke was the only one standing there, motionless, making it hard not to notice him. Their eyes met. In Hawke's deep blue eyes, it seemed as if a star was twinkling. Humanity. The Chitauri soldiers looked at Hawke, who was looking at them. Their snake-like eyes hidden under the dark alloy visor seemed to have received some signal. They left the army and drove their own aircraft, diving towards Hawke on the rooftop. Meeting is like an energy bomb. Energy filled with destructive aura gathered at the front of the aircraft, and the moment it condensed into shape, it was aimed at Hawke and fired. Hawke looked at the rapidly expanding energy bomb in his sight, his pupils shrinking slightly. Boom, the energy bomb hit the rooftop, and the ground shattered instantly, making a loud noise and raising dust. The Chitauri soldier looked at Hawke, who left the moment the energy bomb landed and appeared on the other side unharmed, and pulled the trigger again without any expression. Booms, bang, bang. Booms, booms, boom. The rooftop of the apartment building seemed to have faced the end of the world at this moment, and was bombarded by the Zeta soldiers with energy bombs. Debris exploded. Dust filled the sky. Hawke's figure kept shuttling back and forth in the dust, dodging the energy bombs fired by the Chitauri soldiers one after another. His figure moved quickly under the energy bombs of the Chitauri soldiers. Hawke was a little flustered at first, but now he has calmed down and is in control. It took him less than a minute. Saint Seiya was born for war. The Zeta soldiers fired repeatedly. Bang, bang, bang. As a crisp sound rang out, the soldier who was constantly firing energy bombs suddenly stopped moving, then looked down at the aircraft whose magazine had been emptied. At this time, the wind howled. The Chitauri soldier looked up and saw a broken water tank steel plate whizzing out from the dust, and with a bang, it slammed into his aircraft. The aircraft was hit by the broken steel plate of the water tank. It swung instantly, and the Chitauri soldiers sitting on it subconsciously flew away, but accidentally fell directly from the aircraft. Boom! Hiss! The Chitauri soldier who fell onto the rooftop quickly stood up and drew out the weapon behind him that looked like a gun, but was also powered by a dark green energy source. Fizz! The Chitauri soldiers made indescribable sounds, as if they were saying something, or as if they were communicating with their own tribe. Although Hawke didn't quite understand what the Chitauri soldier was doing, he didn't care much about it. After all, we're fighting, be serious. At this moment, the rooftop of the apartment had been completely shattered after a frenzied attack by the Chitauri soldiers. Although it hasn't collapsed yet, it's no different from a collapse. Most of the rooftop floor has collapsed, and some of it has even continued to collapse to the third floor, revealing the 3-story apartment. But no one noticed what happened on the rooftop. New Yorkers may not be good at other things, but when it comes to saving lives, no one knows better than them. After all, New Yorkers who grew up amidst various shootings and terrorist attacks have long since developed the ability to turn their heads away immediately to save their lives when danger strikes. The dust on the rooftop gradually dissipated. Soon, Hawke's figure appeared. The Chitauri soldier looked at Hawke, who appeared in front of him. His dark green eyes flashed with cold light, and he pulled the trigger in an instant. Go to hell. End of this chapter. Chapter 6, Almighty Bronze Saint Hawke. Chapter 6, Almighty Bronze Saint Hawke. Click. The Chitauri soldier, who was maintaining an attacking posture, instantly twisted his head to 90 degrees. His pair of eyes, which resembled fly-like compound eyes, emitted a faint green light. He looked at Hawke standing in front of him with some disbelief. How did he suddenly appear behind me? The Zetatian soldiers didn't understand. But he didn't need to understand, because this was the last thought in his life. After this thought passed through his mind, endless darkness instantly enveloped him. The Chitauri soldier fell powerlessly to the ground on the rooftop, and the energy weapon in his hand slipped out of his hand and fell to the ground with a snap. That's it. Hawke chuckled as he looked at the Chitauri soldier, who died after he broke his neck. Next second, he felt that in his small universe that was born after the Big Bang, with the death of the Chitauri soldiers, a warm current suddenly appeared in his body. With the influx of this warm current, it was as if a star was lit up in the small universe. At the same time, as the star lit up, a message was also conveyed to Hawke. In the microcosm, the shadows of the 48 bronze constellations became faintly visible after the first star was lit. Hawke closed his eyes and absorbed the information conveyed by the microcosm. Growing up through countless battles, sublime in endless battles. After all, the method of cultivating the microcosm was born for war, for holy war. It is the method of fighting, the method of holy fighting. So, if I want to light up my own constellation in the universe, I need to fight, constantly fight. In the setting of Saint Seiya, the awakening of the cosmos is deeply related to the constellation to which it belongs, but it is not a simple correspondence. If the awakening of the microcosm is liquid, then the constellation to which it belongs is the container. Constellations are symbols of Saint Seiya's identity and containers of power. Bad news. There are no saints in the Marvel universe, so if he wants to have his own constellation, he needs to light up his constellation one by one. Good news. Because there are no saints in the Marvel universe, theoretically, Hawke can awaken any of the 48 bronze constellations. Unlike the Saint Seiya in my memory, it is like 1,000 troops crossing a single plank bridge, with tens of thousands of people competing for a constellation, and only one person is the final winner. After all, in my memory, there are fewer constellations but more saints. But it's different here. He is the only one here who has awakened his microcosm. And so, he can be the Pegasus Saint or the Phoenix Saint, as long as he can light up these constellations in his own little universe. This is great. There is something to say. The child will answer multiple choice questions. Although he is only 17 years old and not yet an adult, he is already an adult psychologically. He wants them all. Wait a moment. Since he can choose all of the 48 bronze constellations, what about the 24 silver constellations? And the 12 signs of the zodiac? Hiss. Hawke suddenly thought of this and couldn't help but take a breath. At this time, he felt the sound of the wind outside and opened his eyes with a whoosh. He saw 2 Chitauri soldiers flying aircraft. After seeing the body of the Chitauri soldier under their feet, they instantly set their eyes on him and then pulled the trigger at him without any nonsense. Booms, bang, bang. It seemed that after seeing the corpses of their companions killed by weak humans, the 2 Chitauri soldiers became angry and kept pulling the trigger, venting their anger towards the rooftop. Under the rage of these 2 Chitauri soldiers, the already shaky rooftop finally collapsed. As the mournful sounds of continuous explosions filled the air, the apartment rooftop collapsed. The entire apartment building teetered on the brink of collapse. Soon, as the two Chitauri soldiers continued to fire around the apartment roof, the apartment building began to collapse, collapsing from top to bottom. The ground seemed to be shaking at this moment, and as huge dust rose, the original 5-story apartment was completely turned into ruins. Some residents who had rushed out of the apartment building before it collapsed, but had not run far away, were now staring at the apartment collapsing in the dust in complete dismay, their mouths wide open. But they soon came to their senses, because the two Zetatian soldiers lowered their flying altitude and appeared in their sight. When they came to their senses, they looked at the two Chitauri soldiers who looked nothing like human beings, screamed, turned around, and tried to run away. It's a pity it's too late. The order they received from the base was to kill the Earthlings, so after seeing these humans trying to escape, they pulled the trigger again without any hesitation. Energy bombs continue to explode. Passers-by keep dying. In just a blink of an eye, this originally poor and not very prosperous street instantly turned into a street like the war-torn Iraq. After clearing out the humans here, the two Chitauri soldiers got off the aircraft, took out the energy weapons on their backs, and pointed their guns at the apartment building that had become a ruin. Because they discovered that the life signal of the human who had just killed their companion was still there. Moreover, this life signal not only did not weaken, but was even strengthened. Stronger. The two Zetatian soldiers looked at each other. Next second, boom. The ruins collapsed and a shadow flashed by. The Chitauri soldier on the right disappeared from the spot. After a deafening sound, the Chitauri soldier who had just disappeared was now like a mural, with his entire body stuck to the wall of the opposite apartment. Dark green blood flowed all over the ground. The remaining Chitauri soldier stared at his companion, who suddenly flew out with wide eyes. Unfortunately, his eyes were too small. No matter how hard he stared, they still looked the size of green beans. The Chitauri soldiers subconsciously ran towards their companions hanging on the wall to support them. But before they took a few steps, they felt a flash before their eyes, and then they flew backwards. At this moment, a loud noise sounded in its ears. Boom! Oh! The Chitauri soldier's chest exploded in midair, and he fell like a rag doll into the ruins of the apartment building. Its body bounced on the ruins like a pinball, then fell into the rubble. Like a statue. Snapped. 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 Hawke appeared at the place where the Chitauri soldiers had just flown backwards. He brushed off the dust on his body and looked around curiously. After killing one Chitauri soldier, 2 more came. Now he has killed 2 Chitauri soldiers, and next there should be 3 more. Hawke thought to himself, then looked at the Leviathan beast that had descended from the space gate above Manhattan. His eyes were fiery. Get ready to try. End of this chapter, Chapter 7, Manhattan Main Battlefield and Queens Sub-Battlefield. Chapter 7, Manhattan Main Battlefield and Queens Sub-Battlefield. Hawke finally suppressed his inner passion and chose not to join in the fun on the main battlefield in Manhattan. The Leviathan beast belonging to the Chitauri biochemical war fortress roared out from the space gate. Its stretched body was extremely huge, and it was covered with a thick layer of alloy armor. Putting aside whether he can defeat the Leviathan, just looking at their size, it can be said that they are as different as heaven and earth. Again, if he had a sacred armor, Hawke might go to the main battlefield to join in the fun. Let's just forget it for now. Anyway, there are also Zetatian soldiers in Queens who look like locusts, so there is no need to run to Manhattan. That's the battlefield of the first generation of Avengers, not his. He has become stronger. But it only became stronger. The awakening of the microcosm is just the beginning, a starting point. It is not the end, nor the destination. And so, Hawke didn't go anywhere, nor did he even choose to take the initiative to attack. Instead, he squatted at the doorstep of his home, waiting for the Chitauri soldiers who were wreaking havoc nearby to fall into his trap when they received the news of their companion's death and came to support him. This is much easier than taking the initiative yourself. After all, the Zetatian soldiers can fly, but he can't. The most important thing. His apartment block was a slum. What is a slum? Let's say that. It takes at least half an hour for an ambulance to reach their neighborhood after receiving a call, while in Manhattan's wealthy areas, it only takes 3 minutes at the fastest. The same is true for monitoring. If the trash cans in the alleys of wealthy neighborhoods are monitored by surveillance cameras, there are no surveillance cameras on the main streets of slums. Even if there were any, there would be no need for the next day. That very night, a few black guys would find a way to take them off and sell them for money. Soon, Hawke, standing in the shadow corner, saw 2 Chitauri soldiers flying by in their aircraft after receiving the news of their companion's death. Hawke's eyes lit up. 2 minutes later, boom, boom. In the ruins of the apartment, 2 more corpses were added next to the 2 ugly corpses that Hawke had arranged neatly so that the Chita soldiers would not see them. After sensing the death of the pilot, the 2 equally ugly-looking aircraft turned around and flew in the same direction. Hawke watched this scene and calmly retreated back into the shadow corner. 1 minute later, after detecting a surge in the number of Chitauri deaths in Queens, a signal was transmitted from a Chitauri warship in a wormhole above Manhattan. Next moment, several Chitauri soldiers who were firing at full speed nearby, roaring and wantonly destroying buildings, vehicles, and killing Earthlings, all turned around at once. After receiving the signal, they quickly gathered towards the roar that had just resounded over Jackson Heights. They received orders to go over there to fight. The Zeta Swiss soldiers roared as they assembled behind their leader, then, led by their captain, who was taller and stronger than the other Zeta Swiss soldiers, and whose aircraft even looked more menacing than theirs, they arrived above the city. Instantly, they saw the mutilated bodies of their 4 companions, sitting or lying in a row on the ruins of the apartment. Squeak. Hiss. The moment they saw the bodies of their companions, the captain of the Chitauri army and the 6 Chitauri soldiers seemed to be stunned. Next second, they seemed to have recovered, as if they had received new instructions, and the aircraft under them started up again. In the blink of an eye, the captain of the Chitauri army and 6 other Chitauri soldiers quickly dispersed, then formed a circle facing the block below. Then, with his snake-like eyes without any color or hesitation, he pulled the trigger of the energy bomb on the aircraft. Like a cold biological weapon. In an instant, the energy bombs covered the sky and the earth like a dragnet, carrying out a blanket bombing on the blocks on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. Buildings in the blocks were exploding, roads were crumbling, and vehicles on the road were constantly exploding and catching fire. The Chitauri soldiers surrounding the block and firing in unison from the sky had no expression on their faces, like machines, with their claws on the triggers never loosening until the entire block was bombed and smoke and dust rose up, until all the energy bombs of the aircraft were used up, and until the Chitauri captain stopped first. Then they all looked at each other in unison like a tight machine and released their claws on the triggers. At this moment, the entire block has been completely reduced to ruins. Old apartment buildings are constantly falling apart. From time to time, there were explosions and burning vehicles. Right now, this place looks more like Iraq than war-torn Iraq. The Chitauri captain, sitting in his own aircraft, once again scanned the seemingly quiet and deserted streets with his big green eyes, which were also larger than others. Then he withdrew his gaze, received the latest instructions, and prepared to evacuate from here. No one could survive the overwhelming barrage of the Zeta Swiss soldiers' artillery fire. What's more, these low-level life forms on Earth cannot even leave their own planet. And so, the Chitauri alien mothership, which had been responsible for controlling and issuing orders on the wormhole side, issued the latest orders to the Chitauri captain through the vision of the Chitauri soldiers. As the Chitauri captain turned around, the 6 Chitauri soldiers also turned their aircraft. But at the moment when these 6 Chitauri soldiers turned around one after another, suddenly, the body of one of their companions on the aircraft arched forward like a cooked shrimp, and with a pop sound, The chest covered with armor exploded instantly. Next second, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The remaining 5 Chitauri soldiers followed the same fate as the Chitauri soldier before they could even react. The moment they turned their backs to the block, their chests exploded, leaving a fist-sized hole. The chest was torn from back to front, and it looked as if someone had punched him from behind. Almost at the moment, when the chests of the 6 Chitauri soldiers exploded, 6 thunderous fist sounds rang out. Booms, booms, boom. Booms, booms, boom. The Chitauri captain, who turned around while sitting in the aircraft at the moment when the chests of his 6 team members exploded, heard the sound of the explosion in his ears, raised his head mechanically, and jumped directly to the right, jumping off the aircraft without any hesitation. Next moment, its own aircraft, which looked more ferocious than any other aircraft, seemed to have been hit by something and exploded in the air. Boom. End of this chapter. Chapter 8, My Fate is Up to Me, Not God. Chapter 8, My Fate is Up to Me, Not God. Hawke didn't know how other saints practiced. After all, the Saint Seiya in my memory is from the anime. Here is the reality. Well known. Stories require logic, reality does not. And so, Hawke, who threw out 10,000 punches every day for a full 1,000 days, can be said to have already mastered this simple boxing technique. There is something to say. If someone can persist in drawing the sword 100,000 times, he can master the art of drawing the sword to cut through the sky. He insisted on retracting his fist and then punching out more than 100,000 times, and after he completed the task of activating his microcosm, his boxing style finally underwent a qualitative change. Sonic punch, a type of boxing that can increase the speed of one's punches to the speed of sound, and is more likely to break the speed of sound after burning one's own microcosm. What is sonic fist? That is, when my fist hits you, you will feel the pain first, and then you will hear the sound of my punch. This is called the sonic fist. Boom, as the aircraft exploded over the block, the Chitauri captain, who jumped out of the aircraft to escape at the critical moment, heard the sound of fist explosions beside his ears, and pulled out a weapon from behind that also emitted a faint green light, but it was not a gun, but a weapon shaped like a spear. He looked at Hawke, who was shirtless in front of him and had a strong body like a sculpture. No way. Although Hawke was not injured in the Chitauri's blanket bombing just now, the t-shirt he had worn for several years was completely destroyed by the flying debris. But not in the way. Hawke, who had taken off his torn t-shirt and was only wearing gray casual pants and a pair of old sneakers, felt a little stronger. And this is no illusion. Well known. Exploding clothes increase combat power humanity. The Chitauri captain held a spear that emitted a faint green light, and his large green eyes, covered by the mask, stared at Hawke intently. Hawke's appearance also appeared on the display screen on the Chitauri alien mothership behind the wormhole. Hawke looked at the Chitauri captain holding a spear with a faint green glow and smiled with his head tilted. Next second, he stretched out his right hand towards the Chitauri captain, opened his palm, closed his 5 fingers, and hooked his finger at the Chitauri captain. No nonsense. Come. Death. Captain Kairita looked at Hawke's nonchalant expression and almost humiliating actions with an expressionless face. With a bang, his feet instantly broke the ground, and then the whole person flew into the air, quickly approaching Hawke. At the same time, the tip of the spear in his hand burst into a faint green light, releasing one energy beam after another. Hawke also exerted force with his feet. The moment the ground cracked and sank, he turned into a golden light that tore through the vision and rushed towards Captain Kairita. In memory, once the Bronze Saints awaken their microcosm, gain the recognition of their constellation, and put on the holy clothes of their constellation, their bodies will become extremely terrifying. Their body's defense will be incredibly amazing, and the speed of their punches and their movements will reach the speed of sound. Even their lifespan is far longer than that of ordinary people. Although Hawke has only awakened his microcosm and has not yet lit up his constellation, and there is not even a shadow of the holy clothes, this does not affect the fact that Hawk is no longer an ordinary person in a sense. And so, puffed, Captain Kyrita, who was rapidly rushing towards Hawk, trying to disrupt and stop Hawk with long-range attacks, and then trying to kill Hawk after getting close, suddenly had a change of expression, and then he spat out a mouthful of the same dark green blood. The gushing dark green blood was so powerful that it directly knocked off the metal mask on Captain Kyrita's face, revealing the hideous face underneath the mask that looked more like a bug than a human. Next moment, the sound of the punch reached Captain Chitori's ears. Boom! Captain Kyrita lowered his head in a daze, looking at the arm that pierced through his solid armor and pierced his chest. Captain Kyrita let out an incomprehensible or meaningless roar, trying to raise his increasingly heavy head and take another look at the human who had killed him with just one move. But it had no time left. Just when it had raised its head most of the way up, as its arms were pulled out from its chest, endless darkness instantly came over it. Boom, without the support of Hawk's arm, Captain Kyrita, shrouded in endless darkness, fell to the ground like a dead insect. When Captain Kyrita fell to the ground, Hawk hooked his right hand and took the energy spear weapon from Captain Kyrita's hand. The interior of the energy spear was filled with a dark green liquid, and as the energy flowed, the spear also emitted a dark green light. Hawk weighed the energy spear in his hand. The question suddenly occurred to him. By the way, if this energy spear and the weapons dropped by the Chita soldiers he just killed were sold on the black market, how much could they fetch? Alien weapons. It should be very valuable. Hawk thought about it and subconsciously turned his head to look at a corner of the ruined apartment. When he was arranging the corpses, he also threw the 4 fallen energy guns into a big pit. At this time, out of the corner of his eye, Hawk caught a glimpse of the sudden burst of brilliant blue light over Manhattan. Come back to your senses. He looked up towards the sky above Manhattan. Into the eye. The dark blue pillar of light that seemed to have always existed between heaven and earth has disappeared. At the same time, the gap that tore the sky above the earth is beginning to close at a speed visible to the naked eye. That's it. It's over. Is the copy of the Zetatian soldiers invading Earth complete? How do you feel? Hawk blinked. He wanted to say that if he had known that the Zetatian troops invading the Earth would be so weak, he would not have been so worried. But Hawk withdrew his gaze and looked at the ruins that had become a complete mess, like a post-war ruin. He could even see some broken limbs and the ruined streets. He took back the words in his mind. It's not that the Zetatian soldiers are too weak, but he became stronger. If I hadn't awakened my microcosm at this very moment, there would probably be parts of me among those broken limbs. Hawk's eyes fell on the broken limbs and arms that were within sight of the naked eye, and he thought to himself, becoming more determined in his idea. He wants to become stronger. Keep getting stronger. Not for anything else, just to be qualified to say that. My destiny is in my own hands. It's not up to God, but Hawk had something more pressing to do right now. That is, find a place to put the 5 alien weapons that you got from killing monsters, and then find a way to sell them for money to improve your life. End of this chapter, Chapter 9, Home Insurance, and Quot Alien Invasion Exclusion Clause and Quot. Chapter 9, Home Insurance, Alien Invasion Exclusion Clause. The Kyrita are coming. The Kyrita were gone. Leaving behind Loki, the leader of this alien invasion, many Chitauri soldiers who were still on Earth and had no time to evacuate, and the devastated New York City they left in disgrace. Good news. Loki has been captured, and even the Chitauri soldiers left on Earth have lost contact with their base and are paralyzed as if the power has been cut off. At the moment when the space wormhole was completely closed, the Chitauri soldiers who were still wreaking havoc over New York City suddenly lost power and fell from the sky one after another like dumplings. Obviously, in this sudden alien invasion and battle to defend the Earth ultimately won the final victory. Bad news. New York City suffered severe damage, with the 5 blocks centered around the Stark Tower being the hardest hit. After all, that was the main battlefield, and it was almost destroyed. The damage in other parts of Manhattan was relatively small, mainly compared with the damage in the main battlefield. But if compared with other places in New York City, the damage was also quite serious. The next is the rest of New York City. But there is one exception. Over in Jackson Heights, Queens, there's a whole block that was practically razed to the ground by the Chitauri. What? Aboard the helicarrier, satellite footage of New York City was being viewed. Commander Maria Hill, in combat uniform, spoke into the headsets of the original Avengers, who were just rejoicing over Iron Man's reawakening. Strangely enough, the entire borough of Queens, except for the Jackson Heights block, has been subjected to a blanket Chitauri bombardment. According to the data stream, the Chitauri rampaging through Queens seem furious and are converging in that area. The original Avengers, who were still on the main battlefield, looked at each other in bewilderment as they heard Commander Maria Hill's words through the headset. In the end, Captain America spoke first. Why? Not sure, the agents are already on their way. Maria Hill said this, then changed the subject. All Kyrita life signals have disappeared. Congratulations, Captain, we won. As soon as these words came out, the original Avengers breathed a sigh of relief at the same time, and then looked at each other. After that, there was a happy expression on their faces. That night, not only the TV stations in New York City, but almost all the TV stations across the country and even the world were reporting the news of the Chitauri invasion of Earth. No doubt, the first generation of Avengers, who were active on the main battlefield and were the main force of this war, were also officially exposed. Captain America, Steve Rogers. Iron Man, Tony Stark. Thor, the God of Thunder. Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff. The Hulk, Bruce Banner. Hawkeye, Clint Barton. Almost all the serious TV stations were reporting the details of this war. The unreliable TV stations broadcast gossip and unofficial history of the Avengers. Among them, the most popular one is naturally Captain America Steve Rogers, who was confirmed to have come back from the dead and reappeared after disappearing for many years without any change in appearance. After all, Captain America is the symbol of America in this world. His popularity is already very high. Now he has come back from the dead and made a comeback. His popularity has skyrocketed. Such as right now. At this moment, Hawk was eating the relief meal distributed by the church staff while watching the wild history of Captain America on the old 18-inch TV not far away. No way. His apartment building has become a pile of ruins. Not only him, but also the people in his apartment, strictly speaking, all the residents in his block have been left homeless. Because their neighborhood was put under martial law by a group of men in black clothes and black ties half an hour after the battle. Some residents who wanted to go back to see if they could salvage their belongings from the rubble were not allowed to go. The response was that a federal martial law had been declared and entry was prohibited. Fortunately, the organizations in the blockade took into consideration their homelessness and found them a temporary shelter in an unused hangar at LaGuardia Airport. They also found a nearby church to provide free food to help them through their difficult times. But, just as Hawk was munching on the bread in his hand and listening to Captain America's anecdotes, he heard sobbing sounds beside him. Hawk came back to his senses and turned his head to look. Into the eye. A burly man who looked to be about 35 years old was now folding his arms and burying himself between his legs. His crying was very soft at first, but soon turned into loud howling. The survivors nearby couldn't help but feel curious. "What's wrong with you?" "My house is gone." "Fine." I thought something serious had happened to the crying man, but when I heard this, the survivor comforted me. "We have insurance, don't worry." It would have been fine if he hadn't said this, but when the crying man heard this, he cried even harder. This time, the survivors are in trouble. "What's wrong? Didn't you buy insurance?" "No, I bought it." I just called the insurance company," the weeping man sobbed, looking at the survivor who was comforting him. The insurance company said that alien invasion falls under the exclusion clause and is not covered by their compensation. The expression on the survivor's face was frozen. What? Exempt? No way. Why won't the insurance company pay? No, I need to make a phone call right away. The other survivors who were listening to the conversation between the survivor and the crying man could no longer sit still after hearing this. They all found their phones and called the insurance company that covered their home insurance. About a minute later, a second crying sound was heard. The third way. The fourth way. In the blink of an eye, the entire hangar was filled with the sobbing of those who were about to become homeless. Hawke was almost surrounded by crying people. In this atmosphere, he felt a lump in his throat when he thought about the loss of his apartment and the non-compensation of the insurance. But he soon reacted. Wait a moment. His apartment is a welfare apartment provided by the federal government, and it will be taken away next year when he turns 18. This is also the reason why Hawke lived frugally and saved up $30,000. Because after he turns 18, he will be kicked out of the welfare apartment by the federal government in the name of independence. After all, 18 years old is already an adult under New York state law, so naturally he cannot enjoy the treatment of an underage orphan. What? You don't have money to rent a house? Sorry, that's none of our business. There are so many homeless people under the bridges and in the sewers in New York City. You can try to ask them if they mind squeezing in. And so, I don't even have a house, so if the insurance doesn't pay, it's none of my business. Hawke came back to his senses and looked at the survivor who was crying and had a somewhat ferocious expression. He seemed to have thought of something and stood up calmly and walked out of the hangar. He was afraid that a gunfight would break out here later. End of this chapter. Chapter 10, How to Create the Cloth in the Marvel Universe. Chapter 10, How to Create the Cloth in the Marvel Universe. 5 days later, Midtown College. The physics teacher on the stage is giving a lecture. Hawke, who was sitting in a seat near the window, was writing the names of 3 things in his notebook with a pen. Mountain copper. Gammonin. There is also silver star sand. No, one may recognize these 3 things separately, but most people will recognize them if they are put together. Holy garment. The Saint Seiya's battle suit, after wearing it, can allow the Saint Seiya to connect to his own constellation and greatly enhance his combat power. In order to forge the holy garment, these 3 items are necessary. Good news. Because he is the only one with a microcosm in this universe, he does not need to actually forge it. He only needs to find these 3 things, and the constellation he belongs to will refine these 3 materials by itself to forge a constellation holy garment that belongs only to him. Bad news. Who can tell him how he can find things in the Marvel universe that only exist in the Saint Seiya universe? Hawke had a headache. Fortunately, he still has time. After all, he has not yet lit up a constellation, so the need for the holy clothes is not urgent. But it is better to prepare for a rainy day than to mend the fold after the sheep have been stolen. Instead of waiting until you light up your zodiac sign before looking for these 3 things, you might as well start preparing now. And so, Hawke looked at the word orichalcum written in his notebook, thought for a moment, and wrote another word next to it. Vibranium. As one of the 3 main materials of the holy garment, mountain copper comes from an alloy in ancient Greek legend. It is a magical alloy that can resist ordinary impacts. Skillful. Vibranium is also considered a legendary alloy in the Marvel universe, and it is the top-level alloy. Vibranium also has the property of being able to resist impact infinitely. Captain America's shield is forged from vibranium. Unique. Unparalleled in the world. As a metal that only exists in legends, vibranium can be said to be priceless. But Hawke knew that there was a place in this world where there was a large amount of vibranium, and it was no exaggeration to say that its vibranium reserves were enough for him to have enough left over after he had completed the 48 bronze saints, 24 silver saints, and 12 gold saints. That's right. He was talking about Wakanda in the 21st century. which not only closed itself off from the outside world, but also pretended to be starving to death in order to obtain food relief from the United Nations. If vibranium can really replace orichalcum, that Hawke was determined to get this. What Wakanda won't give it? I want vibranium. What does it have to do with you? He is not good at fighting, but if someone tries to stop him from becoming stronger, then that would be a fight. Dao struggle. Fight until death. Hawke thought so, then looked at the silver star sand on the notebook, paused for a moment, and wrote the word meteorite next to it. Silver star sand. As the name suggests, it is gravel crushed by the stars in the Milky Way. Meteorites are fallen stars. As long as you can find a meteorite and crush it with the energy from your burning small universe, you can get silver star sand. But, Gambian, this thing, if mountain copper provides metallic ductility to the holy garment, and the silver star sand produced by the burning of the microcosm gives the holy garment the self-repair function, then this Gamanian provides a fusion platform for these two materials and gives the holy garment life consciousness. In a word, orichalcum and silver star sand are not the key to forging the holy garment. Gamanian is the one. Without Gamanian, a saint cloth forged only from orchardite and silver stardust is just an ordinary, lifeless object. Only a saint cloth with Gamanian is a true battle armor belonging to the saints. But Hawke frowned, thought for a while, wrote gamma rays next to it, and then drew a medium-sized question mark. Judging from the fact that it can give the holy clothes life consciousness, and from the gamma in Gamanian, there is no doubt that it is very similar to Hulk's mother, that is, gamma rays. The Hulk was created when Bruce Banner was exposed to gamma radiation. From a life perspective, gamma rays are Hulk's mother. Of course, if Bruce Banner were a woman, then gamma ray could also be the Hulk's dad. In short, even if gamma rays are not Gamma-manian, they definitely have some kind of connection, or even a key connection. Hawke closed his eyes, the tip of his finger tapping the notebook subconsciously, thinking seriously. At this time, he felt someone push him. Hawke opened his eyes and looked at Gwen, who had nudged him with her elbow. "Mr. Anderson is calling you." Hawke was slightly stunned when he heard this and looked up at the podium. Mr. Anderson, whose hair was turning gray at the podium, looked at Hawke and smiled. "Hawke, you answer this question." "Well, this is the teacher who caught me daydreaming." But Hawke stood up from his seat and, after thinking for a moment, gave a perfect answer to Mr. Anderson's question. This time, it was Anderson's turn at the podium to be dumbfounded. However, Hawke's answer was indeed correct. So Mr. Anderson on the podium just looked at Hawke with a look that said "you're lucky this time," and then asked Hawke to sit down. Hawke thanked him and sat down again. Just as he was about to continue thinking about the possibility between Gamanian and gamma rays, a piece of paper was pushed to him from the side. Hawke looked at the contents of the note. Into the eye. Has the court's independent application hearing been confirmed? Confirmed this afternoon. Hawke thought for a moment, wrote his answer under the neat handwriting on the note, and then pushed the note back. His apartment was violently demolished by aliens, and a new welfare apartment has not been arranged for him yet. But Hawke felt that he might not be able to wait for the new welfare apartments. The efficiency of New York City's municipal government is notoriously slow, and he is not the only orphan who has lost his welfare apartment. Hawke estimates that by the time it is his turn, he will have to wait until next year. And next year he will be 18 years old. And so, Hawke has been looking for a cheaper apartment these days. After all, we can't just crowd into a hangar filled with all kinds of smells like refugees. And we have to worry from time to time whether those who lost their homes and whose insurance won't cover them will go to extremes. If I don't move now, I will have to move next year anyway, so I might as well move now. But because he is under 18 years old, from a legal point of view, he is not qualified and no one will rent a house to him. Therefore, Hawke has been taking leave in the afternoons these days to go to the family court in Queens to apply for early independence. And because she had taken the afternoon off these days, Gwen knew the reason for her leave. This wasn't something Hawke said on his own initiative. He's not that boring. In a word, Hawke is a student. Gwen is a student assistant. And he is also a student assistant in the same grade as Hawke. End of this chapter. Chapter 11, Beautiful, Kind, and Academically Successful. Chapter 11, Beautiful, Kind, and Academically Successful. Please continue reading in the old gymnasium. Even though Hawke's inner universe has awakened, he can't just give up the habit of punching 10,000 times a day for 1,000 consecutive days. So these days, he still maintains the habit of punching 10,000 times a day. Anyway, idle is idle. What's more, with the daily boxing practice these days, Hawke could still feel that another star in his little universe was shining slightly. Although it has not been lit up yet, I estimate that if it can last for a month, it will really be lit up. Obviously, fighting is not the only option to light up the stars. At least fighting is not the only option, but compared to the efficiency of punching 10,000 times a month to light up the stars, fighting is the only shortcut. But it is not important. Hawke didn't care either. First, he felt that he was not a violent person, and it was even more impossible for him to be the kind of person who would gain extraordinary powers and then become I don't eat beef the next day. For 1,000 consecutive days, 10,000 punches every day, what he honed was not only his strength, but more importantly, his character. He controls the power, not the power controls him. Secondly, he hasn't even gathered the materials needed to forge the holy clothes yet, so there's no rush to light up his own constellation. Well known. The saints without the holy clothes and the saints wearing the holy clothes are two different species. At least most of them are like this. After a while, after taking a shower and changing into a new t-shirt and pants, Hawke walked out of the old gymnasium with his shoulder bag on his back and headed towards the school gate. The independent hearing he requested was held at 3:30 this afternoon. At this time, if you take the bus to the school gate and then transfer twice, you can get to the court around 3 o'clock. Sitting at the bus stop in front of the school, Hawke ate a sandwich while waiting for the bus. Hawke looked at the various vehicles coming in and out of the school gate from time to time, and began to wonder whether he should buy a car too. Of course, before buying, you should get your driver's license. Yes. Compared to his peers who almost all have a driver's license, he doesn't have one. After all, Hawke had never thought about buying a car before. But now he has this idea. He didn't want to think about it before Zio Yuju awakened, because he needed to consider his future. After all, there would be no federal subsidies after he became an adult. He would need to pay for his rent by himself, and he might even need to pay for college loans in the future. The foreseeable life pressure in the future has made him almost breathless, and he still wants to play with cars. Does he deserve it? He doesn't deserve it. He might not even be able to pay the insurance premium after buying a car. But it's different now. If one were to ask what Hawke's biggest feeling was after awakening his microcosm, it was that he breathed a sigh of relief. He completely relieved himself of the pressure of the unknown future. After all, after awakening his microcosm, if nothing unexpected happens, he will only have two choices for his future: live comfortably and live more comfortably. Even if his heart was a little darker, relying on his awakened microcosm, after creating the holy clothes, he could live a life like an emperor, where those who obey him prosper and those who disobey him perish. Power is strength. Strength is fist. Unfortunately, his punches are now as fast as sound, and in the future they will even exceed the speed of light. But he didn't have that kind of thought, let alone the idea that I don't eat beef. At least not now. However, after relieving the pressure of the future, Hawke felt that he should be able to improve the quality of his life. Apart from anything else, he also has 5 Chitauri alien weapons hidden and is planning to sell them when the opportunity arises. Even if one alien weapon is sold at a cheap price of $20,000, the total cost of 5 of them is $100,000. So, buying a car to improve one's life doesn't seem like a bad idea. Hawke was thinking about this. And just when he was beginning to wonder why he had waited so long and still hadn't seen the bus, a yellow Toyota Corolla with a personalized license plate of GW 521 drove up in front of him. Window rolls down. Gwen, with her blonde hair casually tied up, delicate face, and a pair of blue eyes that seemed to be able to see through people's hearts, appeared in Hawk's sight. Boarding. Hawk looked at Gwen, who was waving at him, and was silent for a moment. No, I'll just wait for the bus, thank you. Gwen smiled. Are you sure you don't want to get on? The bus service is suspended today. Out of service? Hawk was stunned when he heard this. When? Why? Noon. Gwen smiled and said, the New York Bus Drivers Union is on strike today. Didn't you see that there's no one at the bus stop? Hawk subconsciously looked around. Indeed, he was the only person in the entire bus station. Hawk took a deep breath and looked at Gwen, who was sitting in the car and smiling at him. After thinking for a while, he stood up from his seat, picked up his backpack that was placed beside him, walked to the front of the car, opened the passenger door, and sat in. Excuse me, thank you. You're welcome, Gwen said, and after Hawk got in the car, she stepped on the accelerator and rushed out, driving Hawk towards the Queen's Court. Correct. Gwen, who was driving, thought of something and glanced at Hawk in the passenger seat. The judge in charge of your independent hearing has been replaced by Judge Burroughs, and the time has been moved up to 3 o'clock. When Hawk heard this, a question mark slowly appeared in his head, and he subconsciously looked at Gwen. Gwen smiled slightly. Your contact number is from the school, and the counselor couldn't find you. I saw you go to the old gym at noon, so I guessed you might be waiting for the bus at the bus stop. Hawk suddenly realized and nodded. After a while, he came to his senses, looked at Gwen, who was driving, and thanked her again. Thank you. Again, you're welcome. Gwen responded with a smile and looked at Hawk. I'm the grade assistant. Helping students is what I should do. This is the truth. At Central City High School, Gwen, an 11th grade student assistant, has always been recognized as a kind-hearted person. Gwen is very patient in helping classmates who ask her questions about knowledge points and providing them with patient answers. For example, Jessica. Even Flash, Thomson would patiently answer her questions when he sometimes found her. Gwen also stands up when she sees a classmate being bullied. For example, Peter. Even when he saw his female classmate Maria being bullied by the cheerleading captain, he would stand up to protect Maria and scold the cheerleading captain. The most important thing, Gwen's grades are still good. And so, people are beautiful. Kindness, good grades. That's Gwen Stacy. End of this chapter, Chapter 12. From today on, IAND-039, LL be Mr. Hawk. Chapter 12. From today on, I'll be Mr. Hawk. Please read on. If we were to rank the most popular female students at Central City High School, Gwen may not be the most popular, but she will definitely be ranked first. In fact, there is a high probability that it may be the first to be dislocated. The silent majority in the school would probably choose to vote for Gwen. This includes Hawk. He still remembers that when he first entered school, Gwen mistakenly believed that he was being ostracized by classmates because he was not good at speaking and tended to keep to himself, so she tried to help him integrate into the student group. But that's only because Gwen has a kind heart. Hawk never took Gwen's apparent concern for his affairs as anything else. Because if it were any other student, the kind-hearted Gwen would also choose to help. And there is a famous saying. Correct. There are 3 major illusions in life. Among these 3 illusions, she likes me is undoubtedly the most deserving number 1. And so, Hawk naturally wouldn't have such an illusion. Soon, Queen's Court arrived. Hawk looked at the court outside the car, thanked Gwen again for bringing him here, then pushed the door and got out. Then, he listened to the footsteps coming from behind him, turned his head to look at Gwen, who had also gotten out of the car and followed him, and his head was squeezed out again. How are you going to get back? Are you going to walk back? This place is quite far from the airport. Land. The drivers' union is on strike. Subway drivers are also drivers. Hawk was silent. Gwen smiled slightly and took the lead in walking towards the courthouse. Let's go, it's almost 3 o'clock. You don't want Judge Bross to cancel your hearing, do you? Hawk looked at Gwen, who was walking in front of him, opened his mouth, thought for a while, shook his head, and followed her. Court number 3 of the family court. Judge Burrows, sitting on the stand, banged his gavel. Next up, the Hawk independent hearing. Your Honor. Hawk stood up from his seat and politely greeted the judge on the stage. Your Honor. The staff member of the Department of Children and Family Welfare, who was in charge of Hawk, also stood up. Judge Bross looked at the various documents Hawk had submitted for his independent application. After a moment, he turned to the staff of the Department of Children and Families and asked, from what I see in the documents, he has never been adopted and has no foster family. Upon hearing this, the staff member smiled bitterly. Yes, Your Honor. Can I ask why? Hawk was different from other children. When he was little, he didn't like to talk or interact with others, so adopters never considered him. That's why Hawk stayed in the adoption system for so many years and was never adopted. Hawk. After hearing the welfare officer's answer, Judge Burrows nodded and looked at Hawk, who didn't look like a loner. I saw in the documents you submitted that you applied for independence because you wanted to rent a place. Hawk nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Can I ask how you're going to pay the rent once you're independent? I already have $30,000 in my bank account, which is enough to cover my rent until I find a job, if I just rent a cheap apartment. $30,000. Judge Bross listened to Hawk's answer, found the bank account deposit certificate that Hawk submitted when he applied for independence, and then looked at several other documents, with a hint of disbelief in his eyes. There was no telephone, there was no computer. No car, not even a driver's license. Judge Burrows was somewhat surprised. It is not uncommon for orphans to apply for independence before the age of 18. But this is the first time Judge Bross has seen someone reduce all non-essential consumption like Hawk did. Not to mention, it was the first time that Judge Bross saw an orphan who had never been adopted by an adoptive family or taken in by a foster family have such a huge sum of $30,000 in his savings account. Judge Bross thought to himself and looked at Hawk with a somewhat puzzling tone. You have great self-control, Mr. Hawk. Thank you, Your Honor. Hawk felt something in his heart when he heard Judge Burrows address him. Because Mr. is a title for an adult independent man. Really? Judge Bross smiled slightly and stamped Hawk's application for independence with a click. He handed it to the bailiff beside him and said to Hawk, generally speaking, I don't agree to early independence because the adult world is cruel. But you, Mr. Hawk, I believe you are ready. So, congratulations, Mr. Hawk. Hawk took the information handed over by the bailiff, listened to Judge Bross's words, and looked at Judge Bross. Thank you. You're welcome. Judge Burrows nodded and smiled at Hawk, then struck the gavel again. Next case. Hawk left the court with Gwen, taking the stamped documents. Outside the court, Hawk smiled slightly as he looked at the document in his hand that was stamped with the court seal. Because of this court-endorsed document, it means that he has become legally independent in advance, and even if his actual age is not yet 18, he can sign a rental agreement with the landlord. We can finally move out of the hangar, our temporary home, which was a powder keg that could explode at any moment. That's great. Hawk thought happily in his heart as he walked towards the subway station. Next second, he was pulled back. Hawk looked up at Gwen, who seemed speechless, blinked, and reacted. Oh yes, the subway is also out of service. Feel sorry. Let's go. Gwen shook her head, then thought of something, looked at Hawk, and added, Mr. Hawk. Hawk watched as a smile appeared on his face, then raised an eyebrow at Gwen, who was walking towards the car parked not far away. At this moment, there was a traffic policeman standing in front of Gwen's yellow Corolla. Wait a moment, Mr. Policeman. Gwen looked at the traffic police who had already taken out the ticket, ran up quickly, took out a business card from her backpack, and handed it over. The traffic policeman looked at the business card Gwen handed over, was slightly stunned, and then reached out to take it. But this is not a business card, but a family card, a card circulated among the families of the New York Police Department. This card has only one function: prove you're one of us. The traffic policeman looked at the family card in his hand, wrote down the name and phone number of 19th Precinct. George Stacy then looked at Gwen, put away his ticket machine, and handed the family card back to Gwen. "Let's go." "Thank you." Gwen thanked him quickly. The traffic policeman got back on his police motorcycle and sped away. Gwen looked at the traffic police leaving and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. She looked at Hawke with a somewhat relieved tone. "So close." End of this chapter. Chapter 13, the beginning of Hawke and Gwen Andhash 039's story. Chapter 13, the beginning of Hawke and Gwen's story. The fines for traffic violations in New York City are actually not very heavy. But there is one thing that is different from the East Country. Traffic violations here are grouped together with minor crimes. Simply put, if you park illegally in Dongguo, you may only need to pay a fine and have points deducted, but here, you need to take the time to go to the traffic court. And so, after restarting the car and driving towards LaGuardia Airport, Gwen was still thankful that she had gotten out in time. Otherwise, she would have to take leave to go to traffic court. At the same time, she was also a little puzzled. It's strange that you can park in front of the courthouse in Manhattan, but not in Queens. Hawke, sitting in the passenger seat, listened to Gwen's mumbling, thought for a moment, and said curiously, "It should be okay even if we drive out. Talk to Sheriff Stacy and it should be fine." Gwen came back to her senses, glanced at Hawke, and shook her head. "No." Hawke remembered the family card Gwen had just shown to the traffic police. Gwen seemed to see through Hawke's thoughts and explained with a smile, "It's okay to use a family card because everyone uses it, and it's also a benefit the police station gives to police families. But getting a summons is different. My dad definitely wouldn't call his friends in the court just for a parking summons. He would definitely tell me seriously, 'Gwen, you should stand in court and bravely admit your mistake.'" As Gwen explained, she imitated the tone and expression of Sergeant George Stacy of the 19th Precinct of the New York Police Department. Hawke listened to Gwen's explanation and nodded in understanding. He had always thought that Sheriff George Stacy was the kind of old-fashioned and rigid sheriff who could not tolerate any grain of sand in his eyes. But after hearing what Gwen said, it doesn't seem to be. Really? Movies are always stereotyped. 45 minutes later, Gwen drove to LaGuardia Airport. After Hawke unbuckled his seatbelt, he thanked Gwen again as she stopped the car. Gwen spoke up as Hawke was about to open the door and get out of the car. "I'm curious about something, Hawke." Hawke, who had already opened the car door and was about to get out, turned and looked at Gwen after hearing what Gwen said. "What? If I don't accept your thanks, what will you do? Keep thanking me." Hawke was silenced by Gwen's question. After a while, he looked at Gwen, who was smiling and seemed genuinely curious about the answer, and thought about it. "Feel sorry." This time Gwen was silent. "I don't accept your thanks, so you say sorry. That's okay too." Gwen's smile grew even wider, and then she looked at Hawke and said with a smile, "You thank me too many times. We are friends, and friends don't need to say thank you." "Friend?" Hawke was stunned again. Although his relationship with Gwen was slightly better than his relationship with other classmates, that was mainly because his physics class overlapped with Gwen's, and the two were essentially deskmates in physics class. But only there. After all, apart from physics class, he and Gwen didn't have much contact at school. To be precise, he didn't have much contact with any of the students. But Hawke didn't refute Gwen. It was impossible for Gwen to send him back and then say that they were not friends. He still has this bit of emotional intelligence. Soon, Hawke looked at the vehicle, which turned around on the spot after he got out, stepped on the accelerator, and then disappeared from his sight. He retracted his gaze and walked towards the temporary shelter. At night, Manhattan, Goring Apartments, Helen Stacy was at home wearing home clothes and sitting on the sofa watching the new episode of Desperate Housewives. When she heard the door open, she turned sideways to look towards the door. Into the eye. Sheriff George Stacy of the 19th Precinct walked in, wearing a white shirt, tie, a black suit, and a police badge on his waist. Came back. George responded, closed the door, and looked at Helen sitting on the sofa. Where's Gwen? Helen glanced towards the stairs leading to the second floor. Going back to the house. Oh. George nodded, then walked upstairs. When he reached his daughter's bedroom, he knocked on the door. Gwen. Gwen's voice came from inside the house. The door is unlocked, Dad. George then opened the door. Inside the room. Gwen, who had also changed into a cute pajamas and had her soft blonde hair draped over her shoulders, was sitting cross-legged in a chair and looked at George, who came in. Dad, what's wrong? George stood at the door and did not go into his daughter's bedroom. Instead, he looked at Gwen, who was sitting at the desk, leaning against the door with her arms folded. He said with a smile on his face, "You don't have class this afternoon, do you?" Gwen was stunned at first, then she reacted. She lowered her smooth legs from the chair and stood up. Did someone contact you? What do you think? George smiled and said, "You have to call me to verify, in case someone is impersonating my family member card. Although this kind of thing is unlikely to happen. But there is a saying in the Federation, you cannot live, but you cannot not live. There are people who use fake family cards to make a living, but they are very few. However, because it involves law enforcement outside, it is not convenient to confirm in person by phone. So we always write down the license plate number and then return to the bureau to summarize and report for confirmation. If the family card is genuine, then there is nothing wrong. But if it is discovered that the family card is fake, that's fine, because the license plate number is remembered anyway, and that guy can just expect to receive a dozen subpoenas a day. The NYPD will let that guy know that there will be a price to pay for messing with them." Gwen was speechless after hearing what George said. "Dad, I really didn't think of parking illegally. You can park in front of the court in Manhattan." George shrugged. "I'm not interested in your illegal parking. After all, that's what the family card is for. He's not that old-fashioned yet. You can use the family card, just don't use it indiscriminately." Gwen blinked as she listened to George's words. "Then you. But I'm interested in why you went to the rear district court this afternoon." "Oh." Hearing this, Gwen sat back in her chair and picked up the book she had just been reading. "Nothing, just sending a classmate to the court to do something." George smiled. "Male classmate." Gwen put down the book in her hand and looked at George standing at the door with a serious face. "Dad, Hawke and I are just friends." "Wrong." The guy still seemed to be resisting the fact that he was his friend. Gwen thought to herself. She remembered the stiff expression that flashed across Hawke's face when she sent him home in the afternoon after she said they were friends. End of this chapter. Chapter 14, The Phoenix Never Dies, It's Simply Reborn. Chapter 14, The Phoenix Never Dies, It's Simply Reborn. Please continue reading the next day. Taking advantage of the fact that it was Saturday, Hawke arrived at the apartment across from Queensboro Bridge Park early in the morning. His new apartment is here. It didn't take long to find this place. After all, it is difficult to find a good quality and affordable apartment, but there are still a lot of cheap apartments. But even if it is a cheap apartment, the landlord will not rent to a minor, especially when he cannot provide any guarantor. But only after Hawke quickly stated that he had applied for independence from the court did the landlord relent. This is not. Hawke came early in the morning. After seeing that Hawke had been confirmed as independent by the court, the landlord did not say much and directly signed a rental contract with Hawke. After Hawke paid half a year's rent, he left the key to the apartment to Hawke, completing the handover procedures. After the landlord left, Hawke closed the door and looked at his new apartment. The new apartment is also small. To put it in an exaggerated way, it's like a box flattened by life. Old carpet and mottled walls. The living room was pitifully small, With a second-hand sofa and a folding dining table, you had to be careful to turn around. The same is true for the bedroom. After putting a bed in it, there is no extra space. But, although the area is small, all the internal organs are there. The most important thing: this new apartment, like his previous one, had an emergency staircase outside the window that led directly to the rooftop terrace. This is also why Hawke asked the landlord to give him time to deal with the court independence issue. Again, for an apartment that costs $700 a month, why would I need a bicycle? Hawke spent 2 days cleaning and decorating his new apartment. It was called decoration, but in fact it was just buying a new mattress and replacing the shower head in the bathroom, which looked shabby and even a little yellow. By the way, I opened the window and ventilated the apartment for 2 days, which dispelled the curry smell that was originally in the room. Of course, Hawke did not forget. He ran to his treasure trove at night and brought back his own spoils, the 5 Chitauri weapons. I wrapped it in the bed sheet that came with the apartment bedroom and threw it under the bed. Wait until evening. Just like in his previous apartment, Hawke bought a hamburger and a cup of Coke downstairs, then went up the emergency stairs to the rooftop of the new apartment. After looking around, he found a relatively clean place and sat on the floor. He ate the burger in his hand while looking at the stars hanging above his head. As a few stars twinkled in the night sky, the stars in Hawke's microcosm were also twinkling. Hawke has already decided which bronze constellation he will light up for the first time. Not Pegasus, not a white bird, not Tianlong either. But Phoenix constellations are not only containers of the Saint Seiya's power, but also marks of inheritance. Once a Saint Seiya who has awakened his microcosm has his own constellation, he can inherit the attributes of his constellation. And in Hawke's opinion, among the 48 bronze constellations, no constellation's attributes can compare with those of Phoenix. Because Phoenix has an attribute that even the 12 zodiac signs do not have. The Phoenix never dies, it just enters nirvana. If the core of Draco is the dragon's strength and dragon's protection, then the core of Phoenix is immortality and nirvana. Bad news. Because of the core flaw in the Phoenix constellation, the conditions for becoming a Phoenix saint are extremely demanding. As far as I can remember, from the very first Holy War onwards, Athena planned an 88 constellation saint lineup, but the Phoenix constellation never appeared until the SS arc. Good news. This is not the Saint Seiya universe, so the Phoenix here is not as aloof as the Phoenix in the Saint Seiya universe. As long as he lights up the star map of Phoenix in his own small universe in the previous second, he can obtain the core of Phoenix in the next second. The Phoenix never dies, it just enters nirvana. The intensity of his life force will reach a terrifying level. Even if he is really killed by someone, he will not really die. As long as the Phoenix constellation is still there, he will still be reborn and return from the ashes. And so, therefore, Hawke would have to be crazy to leave the Phoenix star map unlit and go to light up other constellations. After all, his original intention has never changed. Live if possible, live more comfortably, and live longer. Therefore, after determining the constellation to which his first light-up star belonged, Hawke no longer hesitated. He mobilized the 12 stars in his own small universe that were lit up by killing the Chitauri, and began to construct his own Phoenix constellation map in his own small universe according to the appearance of the Phoenix constellation map. Phoenix is made up of 1 second magnitude star, 2 third magnitude stars, and 6 fourth magnitude stars. The star that Hawke lit up in the microcosm, by killing the Zetori soldiers, was the smallest 4th magnitude star. 2 4th magnitude stars make a 3rd magnitude star, and 2 3rd magnitude stars make a 2nd magnitude star. And so, 2 more missing. Good. It's very beautiful. Hawke drank his drink and smiled as he looked at the Phoenix star map in the sky above his own universe, which was already lit up and only needed 2 stars to be completely constructed. At this time, the shadows of the remaining 47 bronze constellations flickered in his small universe. Don't know why. Hawke suddenly felt some resentful accusations coming from the other 47 bronze constellations. But amidst the accusations of these 47 voices, a phoenix cry was heard. And after this phoenix cry, the accusations of the 47 flashing bronze constellations also disappeared. Hawke blinked and looked at the Phoenix star map above the small universe. The mostly lit Phoenix constellation was like a truly proud phoenix, hanging in the sky and overlooking the other 47 bronze constellations. Obviously, as Hawke's preferred constellation, the proud phoenix is even more proud when facing the other 47 bronze constellations. Have a look. Phoenix is the coolest. Hawke's mouth twitched, he thought about it, and without staying, he left his own little universe and returned to his new apartment through the escape stairs. After a while, Hawke lay in bed, and while he was still awake, he closed his eyes and thought about the holy clothes again. Lighting up the Phoenix constellation allows him to obtain the Phoenix constellation's undead core. After forging the Phoenix cloth and putting it on, he can gain the exclusive power and skills of the Phoenix constellation, such as the Phoenix Phantom Fist can crush the enemy's spirit, but not its body. It can directly invade the enemy's spiritual world and use its own powerful mental power to tear the enemy's spiritual body into pieces. One left. That is to transform into a phoenix and launch a powerful burning airflow like a phoenix spreading its wings. It is an ultimate move with the power to destroy everything, and it is the exclusive secret of the Phoenix constellation. Phoenix wings flying in the sky. End of this chapter. Chapter 15, Hawke dreams of becoming a lawyer. Chapter 15, Hawke dreams of becoming a lawyer. Heart is worse than action. Phoenix is just missing 2 stars, and it is only a matter of time before it lights up. Even if he didn't fight, according to his training method of throwing 10,000 punches a day, he would be able to light up the remaining 2 stars in no more than 3 months. But Hawke still had no clue about the holy clothes. To be more precise, there was no clue about Garmanian. The other 2 also said, theoretically speaking, as long as you have enough money, you can buy it directly. For example, meteorites can be used to make silver star sand. Not to mention the entire United States, just in New York City, there are a lot of wealthy people who collect meteorites, and there are often meteorite trade fairs. So as long as you are willing to spend money, you can buy it directly. Although vibranium is in short supply. But it's okay. He knew where vibranium originated on Earth. If all he needed was vibranium, and the other party was not willing to give it to him after he spoke nicely, he wouldn't mind taking it himself. Again, I want vibranium, what does it have to do with you? So now there's only one question left. Garmanian. These days, after class, Hawke would go to the library, borrow books about gamma rays, and use the library's public computers to search for relevant information. By the way, he also knew who was the richest man in New York City, who had the largest meteorite collection. Norman Osborn. Yes, this is Norman Osborn of Osborn Bioindustries, who appeared as a villain in the Spider-Man movie. Hawke found a message on the Meteorite Forum from a month ago. In the words of this meteorite enthusiast, there is a room in Norman Osborn's manor that is specifically used to store the meteorites purchased by Norman Osborn over the years. He even found the information of Wakanda's ambassador to the United Nations on the internet. The Wakanda ambassador is in New York City because the United Nations headquarters is in New York. Hawke now knows the whereabouts of the meteorite and the vibranium, but he is still confused about the last and most critical one, Garmanian. Hawke was currently occupying a computer in the library, continuing to search the internet for information related to gamma rays. In fact, if we were to ask who in the Marvel Universe is most familiar with gamma rays, it would undoubtedly be Dr. Bruce Banner, the father of the superhero Hulk. Pity. Even if Hawke wanted to find it, he couldn't. Because after the Battle of New York ended, Dr. Bruce Banner rode his donkey out of New York City, and no one knew where he went. SHILD might know. But Hawke doesn't want to deal with any superhero, let alone SHILD, which is the epitome of trouble. But it's not a big problem. Because Dr. Bruce Banner is not the only one studying gamma rays. There are other people who are also studying it, but they are not as proficient as Dr. Bruce Banner. For example, this paper Hawke just found. On the discovery of gamma rays in the field of biotherapy. Dr. Curtis Connors. Osborn Bioindustries. Hiss. Isn't this Dr. Lizard? Hawke reacted and blinked as he looked at the title of the paper on the screen in front of him. Hey, are you reading Dr. Connors's paper? Hawke came back to his senses, heard a familiar voice, and turned his head to look behind him. Into the eye. Gwen, holding a book in her arms and with a few strands of blonde hair falling across her fair, smooth forehead, stood behind him, leaning forward to look at the screen in front of Hawke. On gamma rays. Gwen looked at the paper on the screen in front of Hawke, and looked at Hawke curiously as he turned his head and said, "You want to go to the law school of New York University. Why are you studying gamma rays?" "No, I went there to make money." Hawke answered in his mind. He set a goal for himself before the plug-in was awakened. Study law. In fact, he originally wanted to study medicine. In the East, persuading people to study medicine might be a punishment from heaven, because in the East setting, if a doctor lives in a mansion and drives a sports car, then this doctor must be corrupt and accepting bribes. But that's not the case here. Let's say that. If a doctor does not live in a mansion and drive a luxury car, people will probably think that your medical skills are not good enough. Therefore, if you can successfully study medicine, being a doctor here is very popular, especially a surgeon. But after thinking about it, Hawke gave up on becoming a doctor. The reason is simple. He felt that he had no talent for medicine, so he had to settle for the second best and choose to become a lawyer in the future. Lawyers are no worse than doctors. The most important point is that after studying law, if you don't want to go to a law firm, you can go to the local procuratorate and become a prosecutor, or even become a judge in the future. However, this was the path Hawke planned for himself before he awakened his microcosm, with the purpose of making his future easier. Not needed right now. Although Hawke was not too lazy to even go to college, at least he no longer felt the urgency to study law. Hawke thought to himself, then shook his head and smiled, saying to Gwen, "I was just browsing online and came across this by accident." As he spoke, he closed the web page, then stood up from his seat, gave the computer to someone else, and planned to go to the old library to complete today's 10,000 punches task. Again, he has persisted for more than 2 years, and now he always feels like something is missing if he doesn't box for a day. Gwen looked at Hawke leaving the library and blinked. When she was thinking about something, the female classmate next to her woke her up and pulled her to find a place to sit down and read. After all, the holiday is coming up at the end of the month, and starting tomorrow, Central City High School will enter the final exam week that is the most terrifying for the poor students. There are poor students in every school. Midtown College is no exception. Except for a small number of students, most students pay tens of thousands of dollars in tuition fees per semester to attend the school. Most of the poor students are from these people. So these days, you can see everywhere that the originally energetic students start to cram and study hard with a book as the exams approach. Hawke doesn't need it. Before his microcosm awakened, he didn't need to cram for books, and after his microcosm awakened, he didn't need to cram for books even more. Anyway, his future is destined to have only 2 options, comfortable and more comfortable. And so, Hawke still maintains his own pace of life. In the old gymnasium, Hawke was concentrating on practicing boxing. Following a teeth-grinding sound of the door opening, a beautiful figure walked in from outside. The council said that after the holidays, they will demolish this old gymnasium and turn it into a swimming pool. Bang! Hawke punched the sandbag in front of him. The sandbag hung in place, motionless, but its surface suddenly shook, and then a cloud of dust was shaken out. The midday sun streamed in through the windows of the old gymnasium. This scene just happened to be captured. End of this chapter. Chapter 16, Day 1, Obey the Law, Day 2, Rob a Bank. Chapter 16, Day 1, Obey the Law, Day 2, Rob a Bank. Please continue reading. Gwen's mouth dropped open slightly. She felt incredible as she looked at the dust, which was shaped like a sandbag under the refraction of sunlight and was slowly drifting away at a speed visible to the naked eye. A heavy sword has no edge, and great skill has no workmanship. Hawke stood there, slowly exhaled a breath, then turned around and looked. Gwen now turned her attention back to Hawke. Eyes facing each other. Gwen looked at Hawke in front of her, his forehead slightly sweaty, wearing a white vest that highlighted his muscular body and his hands wrapped in bandages. Suddenly, she had an indescribable feeling. Hawke looked at Gwen in surprise when she appeared here. "What's up?" "Fine." Gwen shook her head, put her hands behind her back, and walked towards Hawke, looking at the environment of the old gymnasium that she had not been to since the new gym was built. "The new gymnasium has air conditioning. Why don't you go there?" Hawke thought about it. "It's quiet here." "It's quite quiet indeed." Gwen gave a positive answer to Hawke's explanation. Hawke looked at Gwen, who was a little confused as she walked over to the bench where she had placed her backpack and sat down directly. "What's wrong, Gwen?" "Fine." Gwen, who was leaning on the bench with both hands, smiled slightly and looked at Hawke standing in front of the punching bag and said with a smile, "Since you have nothing to do, come and enjoy watching your friend boxing." Hawke raised an eyebrow. He looked at Gwen with a smile on her face and felt that she seemed to be hinting at something. "But, forget it, boxing is more important." Hawke thought to himself, shook his head, withdrew his gaze from Gwen, and returned it to the sandbag in front of him, ready to continue completing his daily task of throwing 10,000 punches. After all, he was almost done fighting. Then Gwen came in. "This is just great. It's time to start all over again." Hawke thought about it, then adjusted his breathing. He did not use the power of the microcosm, but continued to rely on the strength of his own body to complete the task of throwing 10,000 punches every day. As for Gwen on the side, let them watch if they want. This is a public gymnasium after all. He can't stop others from entering. No reason. Soon. As Hawke swung his fist again, the sound of the blow, full of impact and rhythm, once again resounded in this old gymnasium. However, compared to the previous boxing rhythm, Hawke subconsciously sped up the rhythm this time in order to complete the task as quickly as possible. One punch, another punch. Immediately afterwards, a fist shadow appears. Gwen, who was sitting on the bench, felt a flash before his eyes, and then he looked at the scene that appeared in front of him, which seemed to be a sky full of fist shadows with a dazed expression. What happened? I didn't blink either. Gwen thought to herself, and subconsciously took out her cell phone from her pocket and pointed it at Hawke. Hawke, who was concentrating on boxing, watched this scene out of the corner of his eye. Don't record it. Oh. Gwen heard this and blinked as she watched Hawke, who was still moving without even glancing at her. And although she suspected she had just hallucinated, she still put her phone down. After a while, the fist shadows in the sky gradually disappeared, Hawke's movement stopped, and the old gymnasium became quiet again. Hawke then pulled the chain and took down the hanging sandbag. He swung it with one hand and threw it back into the corner. Then, under Gwen's gaze, he walked to the rest bench, took out a towel from the outer bag of his backpack, and looked at Gwen, who was sitting next to him. He thought for a moment and asked again, "Are you sure you're okay, Gwen?" Gwen nodded. Something happened. The corner of Hawke's mouth twitched imperceptibly. But Gwen caught it. She smiled. But Gwen didn't continue teasing Hawke. Instead, she directly stated the purpose of her visit to Hawke. We've started counting the number of people for this year's grade dance. Are you attending this year? Although Midtown High School is a private elite high school, it has all the necessary dances and parties, such as the opening dance, masked parties, and grade dances. Gwen asks Hawke almost every year if he wants to participate. But Hawke never participated. He was a lone wolf, preferring quiet to noisy, bustling environments. But this is a statement made by high emotional intelligence. The real reason is actually very simple. He was poor. He had no money to buy a dress for the dance, and he didn't have a car or even a driver's license. He couldn't just walk his girlfriend home after the dance. The most important thing, he doesn't even have a female companion. Why would he go to a dance alone? To watch couples being affectionate and showing off their love in front of him. This year is no exception. Don't go. Hawke shook his head without any hesitation. Rather than attending a dance or something, he preferred to stay on the rooftop of his apartment and look at the stars. Quiet. The most important thing. Don't spend money. Save where you can and spend where you can. He has become independent early and no longer receives federal subsidies. This week, he has been busy renting a house and buying some daily necessities, and his savings have shrunk significantly. Hawke even felt that the idea of buying a car that he had come up with a few days ago was a bit too hasty. So he has now given up the idea of buying a car. It's better to save some money for emergencies. Anyway, the school has a free school bus to the Bridge Park station, so why bother with a car? He doesn't even have a driver's license. Even if I buy it, I can't open it. Maid. Maybe I should consider robbing a bank. After all, meteorites cost money. Wrong. I was planning to rob something. Why couldn't I just rob the meteorite? Why did I have to rob a bank? You can't just rob a bank first, and then use the money to ask the rich people to buy the meteorites from them. He is sick. Hawke's thoughts were scattered. He was considering the feasibility of directly snatching the meteorite. Anyway, Wakanda will definitely not give him vibranium. I guess we'll still have to fight for it by then. Since robbing vibranium is robbing, then robbing meteorites is also robbing. Since he has robbed both vibranium and meteorites, it seems that robbing a bank is no big deal. Gwen looked at Hawke curiously as he shook his head and said he would not go to the senior prom, and then his eyes suddenly became dazed as if he was thinking about something. What are you thinking? Robbing a bank. Gwen raised her eyebrows. Hawke came back to his senses and subconsciously looked at Gwen. Eyes facing each other. Next second, Gwen looked thoughtful and looked at Hawke with a smile on her face. So which bank do you plan to rob? I recommend you go to the Pacific Bank under the jurisdiction of the 19th Precinct. Hawke frowned slightly. Is Pacific Bank easy to rob? Do not. Gwen said with a bright smile, but my dad is the sheriff of the 19th Precinct. Hawke was silent. After a while, he looked at Gwen seriously. I'm just kidding. I've decided that if I really want to rob a bank, I'll never go to the jurisdiction of the 19th Precinct. Gwen stood up from her seat with a bright smile, and just as she was about to speak, the cell phone in her pocket rang. Mrs. Snow. Hawke. It is good. I know where he is. Soon. After hanging up the phone, Gwen said to Hawke, who was looking at her, Let's go. Mrs. Snow wants to see you. Hawke. End of this chapter. Chapter 17, The First Generation of Spider Spirits appears. Chapter 17, The First Generation of Spider Spirits appears Mrs. Snow. Her full name is Selena Snow, and she is their 11th grade counselor. From small things like personal, social, and emotional support to big things like personal development and college advancement guidance, these are all Mrs. Snow's responsibilities. It's different from public high schools, where counselors are responsible for 100 or even more than 200 students. But Midtown High School is a private high school, so Mrs. Snow is only responsible for a total of 35 students. This also allows us to better provide more in-depth and personalized support to the students we are responsible for. It's another coincidence. It just so happens that both he and Gwen's counselor is Mrs. Snow. But I had been trying to take a quick shower and change into clean clothes but failed, and Gwen was rushing me to Mrs. Snow's office. Hawke asked Gwen curiously, Did Mrs. Snow say anything? No, she just asked me if I knew where you were. If I did, she told me to find you and then go to her office together. Is it? Hawke thought for a moment after hearing this, then looked at Gwen. Could it be from the university, your Berkeley early admission and scholarship? This was the only possibility he could think of for Mrs. Snow to have him go to the office with Gwen. After all, once this month is over and school starts in September, they will already be 12th grade students. I will graduate from high school next June. But before that, students with excellent grades have already locked in their favorite universities in advance, and their favorite universities will also lock in students in advance. For example, Gwen prefers Berkeley. Berkeley, located in California, is a public research university known as the Public Ivy League. It has produced more than 100 Nobel laureates, ranking third in number. Gwen shrugged and looked at Hawke. What about you? Have you decided to study law at NYU and not consider Stanford? Although New York University's law program is also very good. I am always afraid of comparison. If compared with Stanford, at least in the field of law, Stanford beats New York University. So Gwen was a little confused. I heard from Mrs. Snow that he also recommended that you give priority to Stanford. Because I definitely won't get a scholarship to Stanford. Hawke shrugged and explained as he and Gwen walked towards Mrs. Snow's office. New York University is different. Although I can't get the highest-end scholarship, I can definitely get a scholarship. As long as I get the scholarship, I can negotiate the interest rate when I go to the bank to borrow money. Yes, it's that simple. He also wants to study law at Stanford or even Yale University, and then see if he can join some mysterious organization. But it's a matter of whether he can go if he wants to, not to mention whether others are willing to accept him. Even if they do, the tuition fees of Stanford and Yale are enough to overwhelm him. Hawke was being realistic. Since he has to take out loans to go to college anyway, why not find a school that has a high probability of giving him a scholarship so that he can borrow less tuition? He doesn't want to wait until he's in his 50s or 60s and still be paying off student loans every month. Of course, this was the thought and plan before awakening the microcosm. Now, Hawke had no intention of going to Stanford or Yale. New York University is pretty good, and he is only familiar with New York City in this life. He originally wanted to live comfortably, so it is pretty good to stay in his comfort zone. Gwen listened to Hawke's joking excuse and frowned slightly. She wanted to say something, but when she thought of Hawke's current situation, who was also 17 years old and had no car, no house, and no mobile phone, she finally gave up what she wanted to say. Soon, Hawke and Gwen arrived at Mrs. Snow's office. Dong dong. Enter. Mrs. Snow's voice came from inside the room. Gwen pushed open the door and entered the office. She looked at Mrs. Snow, who was sitting behind her desk, wearing glasses and appeared to be around 40 years old. She had a kind demeanor and greeted her. Mrs. Snow. Gwen, sit down. Hawke. Mrs. Snow looked at Gwen, who came in, smiled and pointed at the sofa, then looked at Hawke, who came in right after her, and sighed, again, Hawke, you really should get a cell phone. It's so inconvenient not to have a mobile phone these days. When he first entered school, Mrs. Snow said she would give Hawke an unused cell phone after learning about his situation, but Hawke refused, saying that he would get a cell phone as soon as possible. Then, from the time he started school in 9th grade to now, when 11th grade is almost over, whenever Mrs. Snow asked about Hawke's cell phone, Hawke would always return it as soon as possible. Really? Hawke's answer this time cannot be said to be exactly the same as before. It can only be said to be copy and paste. I'll do it as soon as possible. You say that every time. Mrs. Snow listened to Hawke's answer and felt a little tired, just when she was about to say something else. There was another knock on the office door. Next second, another acquaintance walked in from outside. Hawke, who had just sat down on the sofa, looked at the acquaintance who walked in from the door and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Peter Parker. But for some reason, the Peter Parker that appeared in front of Hawke this time seemed a little different from the last time he saw him in the shower room. How to say? This time, he saw the shadow of the bully Maguire in Peter Parker. To be precise, if before this, he only saw Peter Parker as Peter Parker, then the current Peter Parker made Hawke feel like he was seeing the superhero Spider-Man. Maguire's Spider-Man. The original Spider-Man. Yes. Although this is the Marvel Universe, logically speaking, Spider-Man should be the League version of Spider-Man. But the Peter Parker he saw was Maguire's version of Peter Parker. It's amazing. I don't understand. Mrs. Snow. Peter. Mrs. Snow looked at Peter Parker, who walked in from outside, and her eyes lit up. Wow, Peter, I haven't seen you for a few days. Why do I feel that you have become stronger all of a sudden? Yes. If the Peter before was a stick, then the Peter now is a calf. Hearing this, Peter scratched his head embarrassedly, then smiled shyly, and then his eyes fell on Hawk, who was sitting on the sofa. He was stunned for a moment, as if he was stunned. Hawk happened to look at Peter. The two looked at each other. Hawk saw it for real. The moment Peter Parker's gaze fell on him, Peter's pupils contracted and dilated rapidly at a crazy speed. Really? If nothing unexpected happens, Peter must have mutated. The first-generation spider spirit that really can spit out spider silk from its wrists, without relying on technology, has been successfully launched. End of this chapter. Chapter 18, Osborn Industry and the Daily Bugle. Chapter 18, Osborn Industry and the Daily Bugle. Please continue reading. Spider-Man. Wrong. The spider spirit finally made it online successfully. Hawk caught sight of Peter Parker's pupils shrinking rapidly and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. In fact, the reason why he chose to stand by and watch in the shower room and ignored Peter on the school bus was not only because he did not want to get involved in the tragedy of the superhero, but also because he did not want the first generation of Spider-Girl to fail to go online because of his intervention. There are 3 versions of Spider-Man. Hawk only likes the first-generation spider spirit in front of him, whose face looks like the bully Maguire. As for the extraordinary, he didn't like it at first, but after Garfield starred in The Amazing Spider-Man 3 in real life, he started to like it too. But Dutch Brother Spider-Man, sorry. Hawk really didn't like it. Let me put it this way. The fact that Spider-Man fell in love with a black person directly made Hawk's favorability towards Spider-Man drop to negative. And so, after Hawk's thoughts turned, he looked at Peter Parker, who was staring at him as if stunned, and was the first to speak and say hello. Good afternoon, Peter. Good afternoon. The bully Maguire came back to his senses, and his expression returned to a simple and honest one. After greeting, he looked at Gwen, who was sitting next to him, and also greeted. Gwen. Gwen happened to see the moment Hawk and Peter looked at each other. Although Gwen was a little suspicious, she quickly suppressed it and responded with a smile. Good afternoon, Peter. I heard that you tricked Flesh yesterday. Yesterday at noon, Peter and Flash Thomson caused a scene in the cafeteria. Gwen wasn't there, but she heard from others that Peter was a different person and had beaten the bully Flash Thomson to a pulp. Peter said nothing, just scratched his head and smiled. Seeing this, Gwen didn't say much, but just made a cheering gesture. You should have fought back a long time ago. Come on, Peter. Peter smiled even more sheepishly. Mrs. Snow clapped her hands when she saw that everyone was there and urged Peter to take a seat quickly. After Peter sat down on the sofa opposite Hawk and Gwen, she walked to her desk and grabbed the 3 documents on the table. After a while, Mrs. Snow handed one of the documents directly to Gwen. Osborn Bioindustries, holiday job offer for Dr. Connor's laboratory assistant. Gwen's eyes lit up as she took the document from Mrs. Snow. Thank you. Dr. Connors just told me yesterday that he would contact the school in the next few days. I didn't expect it to happen so soon. Even without this document, she could still go to Dr. Connor's laboratory. But having this document can further prove the authenticity of her future resume. Mrs. Snow then looked at Hawk and Peter. I have 2 more job offers for the holiday, but I'm not sure which one you'd like, so I'll just ask you to come to the office and choose for yourselves. Mrs. Snow was just about to speak as she spoke. Hawk reacted at this time, raised his right hand, and interrupted Mrs. Snow. Wait a moment, Mrs. Snow. What's wrong, Hawk? I still don't quite understand why I was called here. Mrs. Snow was stunned for a moment. Looking at Hawk's confused expression, she couldn't help but say, Have you forgotten about our chat in the office last month? Hawk blinked when he heard this, recalling the routine one-on-one chat with the counselor last month. He remembered it was a routine chat. Apart from the last time she was about to leave, Mrs. Snow asked Hawke about his holiday plans, such as whether he had found any summer job. Hawke said that he hadn't found one for this year yet, and Mrs. Snow then said that if Hawke needed it, she could help find it. He didn't take it to heart and readily agreed. After all, he hadn't found a job for the summer yet. Hawke subconsciously took a deep breath after recalling the conversation last month. Mrs. Snow was amused by the change in Hawke's expression. I remembered. Hawke nodded. Mrs. Snow laughed again, then brought the topic back to the topic, shaking the 2 documents in her hand. One is also a summer job offer from Osborn Industries in the biopower generation department. They need a summer intern to help organize the materials. The other is from the Bugle newspaper. They also happen to need a summer intern. Although these 2 jobs don't sound very technical, but it really doesn't have much technical content. But if you go to look for them yourself, whether it is Osborn or the Bugle newspaper, they will say that they are not short of people. Because this isn't 2 jobs, it's a favor to Mrs. Snow. In a word, the only way to get this summer job is to take the documents Mrs. Snow has in her hand to Osborn or the Daily Bugle. Peter Parker subconsciously looked at Hawke. Hawke, how about you choose first? Hawke came back to his senses and was about to tell Mrs. Snow that he didn't plan to work during the summer vacation, but then he suddenly thought of something and changed his words. I'll go to Osborn. He had just thought of Dr. Connors's paper on gamma rays that he had seen in the library. He was still thinking about whether to find an opportunity to meet Dr. Connors, and now the opportunity has come. Seeing this, Peter looked at Mrs. Snow and said, Then I'll go to the Bugle newspaper office. I really like taking pictures. That is, not only do you like taking photos, you also like taking selfies, and you even like to sell your selfies to your own newspaper. Hawke thought to himself as he listened to Peter's words. Mrs. Snow didn't care what the 2 men thought. After seeing that they had made their own choices, she stopped talking and directly handed the 2 documents in her hand to Hawke and Peter, and then gave them instructions. Peter, when you report to the Daily Bugle, just say you're looking for Mr. J. Jonah Jameson. When you see Mr. James, just give him the documents you have. He'll make the arrangements. It is good. Hawke. Mrs. Snow. When you arrive at Osborn Bioindustries, go to the Bioelectrical Engineering Department and look for an engineer named Max Dillon. I'll call their supervisor in advance. Okay. Hawke listened to the name and nodded calmly. Max Dillon, by the way, is this guy the little unknown engineer in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 who thought he was ignored by the whole world and turned into Electro after falling into an electric eel generator? Forget it. None of my business. Hawke shook his head inwardly. Because he was more interested in the gamma rays that Dr. Connors was studying than Electro, or something like that. After all, he had a hunch that the Gammanian he was looking for was most likely related to Dr. Connors' research. End of this chapter. Chapter 19 features many Spider-Man chapters, but not the Spider Demon. Chapter 19, Spider-Man talks a lot, but Spider-Spirit doesn't soon. After finishing the discussion, the 3 of them stood up from the sofa, said goodbye to Mrs. Snow, and walked out of Mrs. Snow's office behind them. Gwen looked at Hawke, who was standing beside her. Do you need me to take you to the biopower generation department then? No, I can just go by myself. Hawke said this, and without stopping, he walked out of the office building with his bag on one shoulder. There isn't much time left for him. The afternoon classes were about to begin, so he wanted to go to the gym to take a shower first. Peter followed the 2 out of Mrs. Snow's office and watched Hawke's departing back. Okay. Watching intently. Gwen, who had been observing secretly, suddenly spoke up. Peter. What? Peter looked at Gwen, who called him with confused eyes, his pupils focusing quickly, and then he came back to his senses. Gwen. Gwen smiled slightly. Nothing. By the way, are you attending the grade dance this year? Peter smiled sheepishly. Sorry, I probably can't attend. If Hawke didn't attend the dance because he had no money and no female companion, then Peter didn't attend simply because he didn't have a female companion. But the reason Hawke didn't have a female companion was because he was too lazy to find one. If he wanted to find one, with his looks, figure, and the temperament honed by years of boxing training, it would be easy for him to find a female classmate who was willing to be his companion. Peter simply couldn't find a female companion. To be precise, it was Peter who insisted on hanging himself on a tree belonging to Mary Jane. Mary Jane, Peter's neighbor, is also an 11th grade student. Maybe Peter thought that no one knew about his secret crush on Mary Jane, but in fact, most people already knew. After all, everyone is aware that in this situation, no girl would agree to Peter turning herself into Mary Jane's substitute. But the real Mary Jane would not accept Peter's invitation to the dance. Peter also didn't want to go to the ball alone and watch his dream goddess dancing with another man at the ball. Gwen wasn't surprised by Peter's answer either, because she was a friend of Mary Jane, and when the grade dance was just confirmed, Mary Jane found her and put forward her name and her date's name. Harry Osborn. Okay. He fits the standard of boyfriend Mary Jane has always wanted. Gwen thought about it in her heart, but didn't say much. After getting Peter's answer, she nodded and turned away. But, after turning around and leaving, Gwen seemed to have thought of something and subconsciously turned her head to look behind her. Peter was still standing there, looking in a daze at the direction Hawke had just left. A few days later, suddenly, cheers were heard from Central City High School. It's vacation, it's vacation. The summer vacation that students love most has finally arrived. Elle, have you planned your summer vacation schedule? Well, let's go to Hawaii. Tom and I are going to Slovakia. Hiss, Slovakia, didn't you watch the news? What? Didn't they say last week that a tourist disappeared in Slovakia? Fake news. Besides, Tom and I are so strong, what could possibly happen? As the holiday approached, students walked towards the parking lot in groups of 3 or 4, talking about their holiday plans. Vehicles started up one after another, and in less than a moment, the entire Central City University seemed to be empty. The noise that originally filled the entire school also disappeared. Only the percussion sounds in the old gymnasium still rang out rhythmically. About 10 minutes later, the sound of the beating disappeared. Hawke stood there, adjusting his breathing while lowering his eyes and removing the bandages wrapped around his hands. Although he can now hit the steel plate with his bare hands without getting red, the habit has been formed for more than 1,000 days, so he still habitually wraps himself with bandages when boxing. Just as Hawke removed the bandages, a brow furrowed. The next second, a voice came from behind. It is said that this gymnasium will be turned into a swimming pool next semester. Peter. Hawke turned around and looked at Peter, who was standing not far away with a face that looked very similar to Maguire. It's not just a rumor, it's true. Peter smiled but said nothing. This is another reason why Hawke likes the first-generation Spider. Compared to the slightly talkative nature of the Amazing Spider-Man and the extremely talkative nature of Holland's Tech Spider-Man, he still prefers the restraint of the first-generation Spider. Same as him. Talent is restrained. Not good at speaking. Hawke thought about it, then put the bandage back into his pocket and looked at Peter. You came here today not just to tell me that this gymnasium will be converted into a swimming pool, right? Peter quickly shook his head. No. What is that? Peter was about to speak, but he drew back the words and looked at Hawke hesitantly. Hawke smiled. He looked at Peter, who seemed to be hesitant to speak, but did not say anything. Instead, he walked towards his backpack, put on his shoulder bag, and walked outside. Happy summer vacation, Peter. Bah. Hawke was almost at the door when he heard a sound like a spider spinning silk. The moment he turned around, he punched out with his right fist. Peter's spider sense, which was shooting out spider silk not far away, kicked in and he subconsciously moved to the side. Next second, oh. A bench in the old gymnasium suddenly broke in the middle. Peter's eyes widened as he looked at the broken bench. Hawk took off the spider silk that was stuck to his shoulder bag. Very sticky. He shook it hard a few times before finally getting the ball of spider silk out. Peter had come back to his senses by now and looked back at Hawk. Hawk, you too. I'm not. Hawk looked up and interrupted Peter directly. The reason he has the strength he has today is due to his unremitting struggle and hard work day after day. Of course. In this process, plugins may have played a role. But not much. Hawk firmly believed that even without the cheat, he could still awaken his microcosm. Yes. Anyway, the cheater has left now and has no say anymore, so there is nothing wrong with what he said. But that wasn't the real reason he interrupted Peter. Hawk gave Peter a look. Peter, who has spider sense, understood it instantly. Hawk smiled. Have a great summer, Peter, and see you next semester. Okay, see you next semester. Peter took back what he wanted to say this time and responded. Hawk stopped talking and walked out of the gym. Then, he looked at Gwen outside the door, a hint of surprise flashing across his face. Gwen. Gwen. End of this chapter. Chapter 20, the past was the past, and the present is now. Chapter 20, the past was the past, and the present is now. Hawk looked surprised. Gwen fell silent as she looked at Hawk's expression. Fake. Too fake. Gwen couldn't help but give a heartfelt comment. Your acting is so fake. Feel sorry. Hawk shrugged. I'm not a professional actor. Yes. Gwen was already outside. To be precise, he came over just when Peter was about to confront him, but stopped when he heard the noise inside the gym. Gwen thought Hawk and Peter wouldn't notice. But, after awakening his microcosm, Hawk, who controlled his first 5 senses, could hear not only Gwen's footsteps, but even the sound of falling leaves behind the gymnasium as long as he wanted to. The same goes for Peter, who has spider sense. Not to mention that this version of Peter is a genuine spider spirit Peter who has undergone a mutation. However, Peter has only just mutated and has not yet fully adapted. In addition, Hawk's punch just now also shocked Peter. But Peter reacted quickly after being reminded by Hawk's eyes and caught sight of Gwen's breathing outside the gymnasium. So the two of them tacitly chose to keep quiet. Look, this is another reason why Hawk likes the original Spider-Ghost the most. He makes no comment on the amazing Spider-Man. But Tech Spider-Man, haha. Hawk had no doubt that if it was Holland or Spider-Man, that guy probably wouldn't understand what he meant, and might even continue to chatter on and on. Wrong. It's not maybe, it's certain. Hawk thought to himself. At this time, Peter also came out from the back and then looked at Gwen outside with a hint of surprise on his face. Gwen, you haven't left yet. Gwen looked at the frozen expression of surprise on Peter's face and couldn't help herself. Peter, your acting is not as good as Hawk's. Peter's expression froze. He scratched his head subconsciously and smiled, then said goodbye to Hawk and walked towards the school gate on his own. Seeing this, Hawk also prepared to leave. He has to go to Osborn Bioindustry to work his summer job early tomorrow morning, so he plans to go to bed early tonight. Gwen blocked his path. There's something wrong with you, Hawk. What? Hawk was slightly stunned. Gwen frowned and looked at Hawk curiously. When did you become so familiar with Peter? I've never seen you talk to Peter before. To be precise, she had never seen Hawk chatting with anyone. Even if other students came to Hawk, he would send them away with a few words and continue to do his own thing. Also, like at the dance, at the beginning, some female classmates took the initiative to approach Hawk and asked if he could be their male date. Result: to use the words circulated among female classmates. Hawk, that's a iceberg, a 10,000-year-old iceberg. The same is true for other female classmates. Gwen is no exception. Gwen thought about the times when she looked for Hawk. Although Hawk didn't show it, Gwen could feel that Hawk seemed to be resisting talking to her. But today, her intuition told her that now that Hawk was talking to her, That invisible sense of resistance seemed to have disappeared. Gwen was curious about this. Hawke listened to Gwen's complaints and explained with a relaxed expression, Peter and I weren't close. He came to see me because I happened to be there when lightning trapped him in the bathroom last time. He came to thank me for that. Gwen listened to Hawke's explanation and fell silent again. After a while, she looked into Hawke's eyes and a smile appeared on her face. If you don't want to say it, you don't have to say it. There's no need to lie. Hawke heard this, thought about it, looked at Gwen's pretty eyes and nodded. Well, I don't want to talk about it. I'll find out for myself. Can? Hawke nodded, preparing to leave, but before he did, he thought for a moment and said to Gwen, investigate as you please, but don't get too involved. I've heard that when a woman becomes curious about a man, that's the beginning of her downfall. Gwen finally realized that Hawke's previous subtle resistance towards her had disappeared, but she gave a sneer on the surface. I don't think I'd fall for a guy who barely considers us friends. She once again thought about when she sent Hawke home a few days ago, and the reluctant expression on Hawke's face after she said they were friends. Wrong. By that time, Hawke's resistance to her had already weakened. Gwen thought about the scene of that day again, and her heart moved. Hawke didn't refute, but just shrugged and walked down the stairs. Goodbye, Gwen. Gwen looked at Hawke's departing back and shouted, I'll find out your secret. Come on. Hawke waved without turning around. He didn't take this matter to heart. What I just said to Gwen, that when a woman becomes curious about a man, she will fall for him, was just a casual remark. But if I hadn't awakened my microcosm, I probably wouldn't have said such a thing. Hawke sat in the last row of the school bus heading back to his new apartment, looking at the scenery passing by outside the window, and couldn't help but think in his heart. After all, for Hawke before he awakened his universe, love was a luxury. It was still a luxury that was out of his reach. But after awakening the microcosm, there is something to say. Money makes a man bold. Although Hawke still has no money now, he has fists. Power is the fist. Power is money. The same reason. Having fists means having money. And so, before was before. This is now. Now that I have awakened my own little universe, I should have the qualifications to say that I can have love based on my strength. Hawke thought to himself. At this time, the scene of Gwen looking at him just now appeared in his mind, and then his heart couldn't help but twitch at this moment. Hiss. Hawke reacted, took a breath, and subconsciously shook his head, putting the sudden thought behind him. Without him, the warning about the 3 major illusions in life is online again. He is not Peter. Peter would mistakenly think that Mary Jane liked him just because she smiled at him. Hawke would have no such illusion. And so, forget it. Business matters. I will start my summer job at Osborn Bioindustries tomorrow. Then I will know whether what is in Dr. Connor's laboratory is the Gamanian he wants. If so, that would be great. Hawke has already thought about it. Once the key to forging the holy armor, Gamanian, is confirmed, his next target will be Wakanda, where vibranium is abundant. Again, if Wakanda is willing to hand over the vibranium he wants, everyone will be happy. But what if Wakanda not only refuses to give it to him, but even dares to fight back? Haha. That would be embarrassing. Hawke, not good at speaking, but know a little bit of boxing. End of this chapter. All right, legends, that's it for today. If you're ready for the next chapter, smash that like button and flood the comments right now. Remember, we've got 3 days to prove this story needs to continue. Subscribe so you don't miss the drop, and I'll meet you in the next audiobook.